A botanist named Elara arrives at the cursed Ravenwood estate to study its mysterious roses, only to uncover a haunting love story bound by blood, betrayal, and magic where every bloom demands a sacrifice, and love may be the only key to breaking the curse.
Elara's boots crunched softly against the gravel path as she pushed open the wrought iron gates of Ravenwood. The estate loomed before her, a sprawling mansion draped in ivy, its windows reflecting the waning light of the late afternoon sun. Yet it was not the house that held her attention, but the garden beyond, bursting with roses of every conceivable color and shade. Their scent was intoxicating, thick and heady, but beneath it lingered an undercurrent of something less pleasant, a subtle metallic tang that prickled at the back of her throat. She swallowed hard, her sharp green eyes scanning the surroundings. The villagers had been tight-lipped, their warnings wrapped in half-formed stories about lovers who had vanished among these very roses each summer. Elara's scientific mind dismissed superstition, yet the weight of those whispered tales settled on her like a persistent shadow. Her fingers brushed the leather strap of her satchel, feeling the reassuring presence of her notebooks and tools inside. She was here to study the rare rose variants that had reportedly thrived only in Ravenwood's soil. But something deeper called to her, a need to understand the strange legacy entwined with these blooms. As she ventured further down the winding path, the garden's colors grew richer, petals shimmering with dew despite the dry air. Suddenly, movement caught her eye. There, tending to a cluster of deep crimson roses, was a man. He moved with a quiet reverence, the careful way he pruned the stems speaking of a deep connection to this place. Rowan's messy auburn hair fell in soft waves around his face, and his piercing blue eyes met hers briefly before flicking away. He was tall and strong, his earth-toned clothes blending almost seamlessly with the garden's hues. There was an intensity in his gaze, as if he bore the weight of secrets too heavy to share. Elara felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, curiosity, perhaps, or the faintest stir of attraction. She cleared her throat, stepping closer. "I'm Elara," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "I've come to study the roses here." He nodded, offering a brief, guarded smile. "Rowan, welcome to Ravenwood." Their conversation was tentative, filled with pauses and unspoken questions. Rowan's restraint only deepened the mystique surrounding him, and Elara found herself drawn into the strange magnetism of the garden and its enigmatic caretaker. Nearby, the faint murmur of villagers drifted on the breeze. Their eyes were wary, their whispers laced with fear and old grief. Elara overheard fragment stories of lovers lost, of petals turning to ash, of a curse that clung to the roses like thorns. But the botanist in her refused to be swayed by superstition. She set up her equipment near an ancient stone bench, jotting down observations as the sun dipped lower. The rose's colors deepened, glowing with an almost supernatural vibrancy that both thrilled and unsettled her. As twilight shrouded the garden, a cool breeze stirred the petals, carrying with it a chorus of whispered voices that seemed to echo from the very earth beneath her feet. Elara's heart quickened. The garden was alive, and it had stories to tell, stories of love, loss, and a darkness that stretched back through generations. Rowan appeared once more in the fading light, his eyes reflecting the rose's deep hues. He offered her a glance that was part warning, part invitation, before disappearing into the shadows of the garden, leaving Elara alone beneath the blooming thorns. The night was just beginning, and so was her journey into the heart of Ravenwood's mysteries. The morning light filtered through the mist like a silken veil as Elara stepped carefully between the rows of roses. Each bloom was more vibrant than any she had seen before, petals unfolding in impossible hues, deep crimsons that seemed to drink in the sunlight, blushing pinks that whispered of secrets, and ghostly whites that shimmered faintly in the cool dawn. The air was thick with their scent, sweet and intoxicating, but beneath it lay an undercurrent of something darker, something unsettled. Around her the garden was alive yet silent, as if holding its breath. Elara's fingers brushed over the thorned stems, careful not to prick herself, as she took meticulous notes in her weathered journal. The roses here did not behave like ordinary flowers. Their growth patterns defied known horticultural science, their petals occasionally quivering as if stirred by an unseen breath. A shiver ran down her spine, a mixture of fascination and unease. She spoke softly to the plants, a habit she had long kept, as if her voice could coax the garden's secrets out. Her footsteps led her toward the estate's edge, where the village of Ravenwood lay tucked beneath a canopy of ancient trees. The houses were worn but sturdy, with ivy crawling up their stone walls and smoke curling from chimneys in lazy spirals. As Elara approached the small square, she noticed the wary glances of villagers pausing their daily chores to watch her. Their eyes held stories, some curious, others wary, many haunted. She greeted a woman washing clothes by the well, whose smile was polite but tight. "You renew here," the woman said with a hint of caution. "The garden's beauty is a curse, they say. Lovers go in, but some never come back when summer blooms peak." Elara frowned but kept her tone gentle. "Is it just a story?" The woman's gaze flicked to the shadows under the trees. "Stories hold more truth than you'd like sometimes. Be careful." Word spread quickly, and before long, Elara found herself surrounded by murmurs of vanished lovers and whispered warnings. The villagers' fear was palpable, a living thread woven into the fabric of the town. Yet amidst the caution, a few eyes held a spark of something else, hope, or perhaps defiance. It was Mara who finally drew Elara into the heart of the mystery. The herbalist's cottage was a world apart from the village, a sanctuary of earth and flame, where dried herbs hung from the rafters, and the scent of lavender and rosemary softened the air. Mara welcomed Elara with a warm smile, her silver hair catching the light like woven moonbeams. "You seek answers," Mara said softly, motioning for Elara to sit by the hearth. "But answers come at a cost. The roses hold memories, pain, and promises long broken." Elara leaned forward eagerly. "What do you mean?" Mara's eyes darkened with the weight of knowledge. Long ago, a love so fierce it defied all bounds was betrayed. The garden was born from that anguish, a curse to bind hearts and punish those who dare to love within its walls. Each rose is a fragment of that sorrow. A silence fell between them, thick and potent. Elara's scientific mind wrestled with the impossible, yet every fiber of her being sensed the truth carried in Mara's words. She felt the garden's pulse alive, watchful and waiting. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting dappled light through the trees. Elara's thoughts were interrupted by movement. Rowan appeared at the edge of the clearing, his auburn hair tousled, eyes sharp and unreadable. He approached with measured steps, hands stained from tending the earth. "You shouldn't linger too long," he said quietly, voice low but edged with concern. "The garden doesn't take kindly to strangers meddling in its affairs." Elara met his gaze, sensing the layers of pain and protection beneath his calm exterior. "I'm here to understand," she replied steadily, "to find the truth behind the roses." Rowan's eyes flickered with something almost like gratitude. "Be careful what you seek, some truths come wrapped in thorns." Their exchange was brief but charged, a silent promise hovering between them. As Rowan turned back toward the garden, Elara's heart thrummed with a mix of anticipation and dread. The roses bloomed around them, beautiful and dangerous, whispering secrets only she was beginning to hear. As evening fell, Elara returned to her room, the scent of roses lingering in the air. Her journal lay open, pages filled with observations and questions, but also the beginnings of a new kind of inquiry, one that reached beyond science into the realm of the unknown. Outside her window, the garden was alive with shadows and whispers, a world waiting for her to uncover its deepest mysteries. And somewhere, beneath the thorns and petals, a story as old as the garden itself was stirring, one that would test the limits of love, trust, and sacrifice. Elara stepped deeper into the heart of the rose garden, the soil beneath her feet soft and springy from recent rains. The air was saturated with the heady scent of blossoming roses, crimson, ivory, and blush pink petals unfurling under the summer sun. She knelt beside a cluster of unusually vibrant blooms, their petals almost luminescent, radiating a warmth that contradicted the cool morning air. Her gloved fingers brushed gently across the velvety surfaces, noting the subtle pulse of life beneath, a rhythm that seemed almost alive beyond natural explanation. She frowned, flipping open her notebook, the pen poised to capture every anomaly. Yet, the more she observed, the less her scientific theories seemed to apply. This garden harbored secrets that defied logic. A soft rustle behind her drew her attention. Rowan stood nearby, his piercing blue eyes watching her with a mixture of caution and something softer concern. His auburn hair was tousled by the breeze, and the earth tones of his clothes blended seamlessly with the garden's rich hues. "You are not like the others," he said quietly, stepping closer. "You don't run away when the roses bloom." Elara met his gaze, a flicker of challenge in her sharp green eyes. "I want to understand. That's why I'm here." For a moment, Rowan said nothing. Then, gesturing toward a shaded arbor draped in deep red roses, he invited her to sit with him. They settled beneath the canopy, where the sunlight filtered through the petals, casting dappled patterns that danced gently across their faces. The garden was alive with the quiet hum of bees and the distant chirping of birds, a serene backdrop to the tension simmering between them. "This garden," Rowan began, his voice low and steady, "has been a place of beauty and tragedy for generations. My family has tended these roses for centuries, always guarding a secret no one else dared to speak aloud." Elara listened intently, her scientific curiosity piqued despite her instincts warning caution. "A curse?" she asked, hesitant but unable to suppress the question. He nodded slowly, eyes clouded with memories. "An ancient sacrifice bound to the bloodline of the original gardener. Each summer, when the roses bloom fullest, lovers who enter this garden vanish without a trace." The words hung heavy between them, the scent of the roses suddenly sharp, almost suffocating. Elara's mind raced to find rational explanations: mass hysteria, environmental toxins, psychological phenomena, but none fit the chilling consistency of the disappearances. Her skepticism battled with the undeniable aura of the garden's dark history. "Why tell me this now?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Because you read different," Rowan replied, his gaze steady. "You ask questions, you see beyond the surface, and because I believe you might be the one to end it." A shiver ran down Elara's spine, equal parts fear and fascination. Her heart pounded not just from the weight of Rowan's revelation, but from the fragile trust building between them. She realized that this garden, with all its beauty and menace, had begun to weave them into its story. As the afternoon waned, shadows lengthened across the garden paths. Elara and Rowan shared fragments of their pasts, her loss of a childhood friend to a mysterious disappearance. His burden of safeguard earning a legacy steeped in pain and sacrifice. Each revelation peeled back layers of guardedness, revealing vulnerable humanity beneath. The distant rumble of thunder echoed, and a cool breeze stirred the roses, their petals trembling as if whispering secrets. Elara glanced around, the garden seeming to pulse with a life of its own, both enchanting and ominous. "I want to believe," she admitted, "but how do you live with this curse? With the knowledge that it could claim anyone you love?" Rowan's jaw tightened. "I don't live with it, I survive. But with you here, maybe there's a chance for something different." The garden around them seemed to respond, the colors of the roses deepening, their fragrance intensifying. A fragile hope blossomed in the space between them, tempered by the shadow of the curse that loomed over Ravenwood. As twilight approached, Elara stood, determination settling in her bones. She would uncover the truth no matter where it led. But as she looked back at Rowan, she knew this journey would bind their fates together in ways neither could yet comprehend. The roses continued to bloom, their beauty both a promise and a warning, and the secrets of Ravenwood were just beginning to come to light. The caretaker's shed was a small, shadowed sanctuary nestled at the edge of the rose garden, its weathered wooden walls steeped in decades of whispered secrets. The air inside was thick with dust motes dancing lazily in the pale shafts of afternoon light that filtered through the grimy windows. Elara stepped cautiously into the cramped space, the soles of her boots creaking softly on the creaking floorboards. She was greeted by the sight of Old Thumb, the garden's aged caretaker, hunched over a cluttered desk piled high with yellowed papers and brittle journals. He looked up as she entered, his face etched with lines carved by time and worry. "You must be Elara," he said in a gravelly voice, pushing back his graying hair. "I've been expecting you." Elara nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. "I'm grateful you agreed to meet with me, Thumb. I need to understand this garden, its history, the disappearances." Thumb gestured toward the desk. "Here, take a look. These are the records I've kept, accounts from long before my time, passed down through the family who tended these grounds." Elara leaned in, the musty smell of old paper filling her senses as she opened a leather-bound journal. The faded ink chronicled a chilling pattern, lovers who had wandered into the rose garden during summer, only to vanish without a trace. Each entry was a delicate thread in a tapestry of loss and lingering sorrow. "Why has no one tried to stop this?" Elara whispered, tracing a fragile line of script. Thumb's eyes darkened, because no one truly knows what lies at the heart of the curse. Many have tried, but the garden holds its secrets close, and it demands a price. The silence between them was broken by the sudden arrival of footsteps pounding against the gravel outside. The shed door burst open, revealing Nathan, Elara's childhood friend, his brow furrowed with urgency.
"Elara!"
he exclaimed, rushing inside. "You have to leave. Now, this place, it's not safe. The curse, it's real. I've heard the stories, seen the fear in the villagers' eyes. You don't belong here." Elara met his gaze steadily, her heart pounding in conflict. "I can't run from this, Nathan. Not when I'm so close to understanding the truth." He grabbed her arm, his grip firm but desperate. "Please, just listen to me. I don't want to lose you too." The weight of his worry pressed on her, but so did the pull of the garden's dark mystery and Rowan. She thought of the gardener's descendant, his quiet strength beneath the blooming roses, the way his blue eyes held unspoken pain. The connection she felt to him, fragile yet fierce, was a tether she couldn't ignore. As Nathan's words echoed, Elara's resolve crystallized. She would stay. She needed to see this through, to face whatever shadows lurked in the garden's depths, for the sake of the lovers lost, for Rowan, and for herself. Later, beneath the canopy of crimson and ivory petals, Rowan appeared silently at her side. He tended to a thorny stem with gentle hands, the scent of roses thick in the air. Their eyes met, and in the silence between them, a quiet understanding blossomed, a promise to face the darkness together. When twilight draped the garden in dusky hues, Elara stood alone at its edge, the cool air brushing her skin as whispers seemed to rise from the earth itself. The roses, so beautiful yet sinister, shimmered faintly in the fading light. She took a deep breath, the chill of fear mingling with the fire of determination. The garden's shadow was long, and the night ahead promised secrets and sacrifice. But Elara's heart beat steady for the first time. She felt ready to confront the curse that had haunted Ravenwood for generations. As the last light slipped away, a distant rustle stirred among the thorns, and Elara knew her journey was only beginning. The morning sun filtered gently through the canopy of towering oaks as Elara made her way toward the heart of Ravenwood's rose garden. Dew still clung to the petals and leaves, sparkling like scattered diamonds in the soft light. The air was thick with the intoxicating scent of blooming roses, a rich, heady perfume that both comforted and unsettled her. Today was the day she'd promised herself to get closer to the source of the garden's mysteries, and perhaps to the man who tended it so carefully. Rowan was already at work when she arrived, his strong frame silhouetted against the vibrant reds, pinks, and whites of the flowering bushes. He wore his usual earth-toned clothes, sleeves rolled up, hands steady as he pruned away withered stems and coaxed life from the thorny branches. His auburn hair was tousled from the morning breeze, and his piercing blue eyes briefly met hers with an unreadable expression. "I didn't expect you so early," he said, his voice low but not unwelcoming. Elara smiled, brushing a stray lock of dark hair behind her ear. "I thought I'd help. Might learn a thing or two from the expert." For a moment, Rowan's guarded demeanor softened. "Careful around the thorns. They're sharper than they look." Together, they moved through the rows of roses, Elara's fingers deftly mimicking Rowan's careful pruning. The garden felt alive under their touch, each snip and clip a small act of care and defiance against the curse that clung invisibly to the soil. As the sun climbed higher, Rowan's stories began to spill out, first in fragments, then in quieter, more vulnerable admissions. He spoke of his mother, lost to the garden when the roses bloomed full and bright, her disappearance a wound that never healed. The weight of protecting the garden's secret pressed heavily on him, a burden carried silently for years. Elara listened intently, her scientific mind struggling to reconcile the tangible pain in Rowan's voice with the legends she'd heard whispered by villagers. Could such sorrow truly be entwined with the blooming roses? The garden's magic was no longer just a theory but a living, breathing force she could feel in the air around them. During a pause, a single crimson petal drifted downward, its edges dark and curling like embers. Elara caught it gently, a shiver running through her as she studied the strange discoloration. "There's something more to these roses," she murmured, "something that defies explanation." Rowan nodded, his gaze distant. "They were beautiful, but they carry a price, one that's been paid in love and loss for generations." Despite the shadows hanging over their conversation, a fragile thread of hope began to weave between them. By afternoon, the garden seemed to glow with a muted light, the roses whispering secrets only they could hear. Elara and Rowan shared small smiles, laughter even, as the weight of fear momentarily lifted. As they rested beneath an ancient archway of blooming vines, Rowan reached out, brushing a stray petal from Elara's cheek. "We're in this together now," he said softly. Elara met his gaze, her heart pounding together. The roses bloomed around them, vibrant and full of promise, yet beneath their petals, the curse waited, patient and relentless. The day's tenderness was a fragile bloom itself, destined to be tested by the darkness that crept ever closer. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting Ravenwood in hues of gold and shadow, Elara knew the path ahead was no longer hers alone to walk. With Rowan by her side, she was ready to face whatever the garden demanded, even if it meant risking everything. But the roses had many secrets still, and not all of them would be revealed before the petals fell. The afternoon sun filtered softly through the aged windows of Mara's cottage, casting gentle patterns on the worn wooden floor. Shelves lined with jars of dried herbs and bundles of flowers filled the space with a comforting earthiness, mingling with the faint sweetness of fresh rose petals scattered about. Elara sat opposite Mara, her fingers absently tracing the edges of a yellowed parchment Mara had produced from a faded, leather-bound book. The room was quiet except for the occasional creak of the floorboards and the soft rustle of leaves outside. Mara's silver hair shimmered in the light as she spoke, her voice low and steady, weaving a tale that seemed to reach back through centuries. The curse, she began, was not born of malice alone. It was born from heartbreak, betrayal, and a sacrifice that stained the very soil of Ravenwood. My ancestor, a woman named Isolde, was bound to this garden in ways no one truly understands. Elara leaned forward, eyes sharp and alert despite the growing weight of unease settling in her chest. "Isolde?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Mara said, nodding slowly. She loved deeply, but that love was forbidden, tangled in secrets and lies. When betrayal shattered her world, she called upon powers beyond her time, binding the garden with a curse meant to protect and punish all at once. The air in the room seemed to thicken, the scent of roses growing stronger, almost intoxicating. Elara swallowed hard, the scientific part of her mind wrestling with the undeniable presence of something ancient and alive. So the disappearances, she murmured, they're the result of this curse. Mara's gaze was steady, unwavering. Each vanished lover is a thread in an unending tapestry, woven by pain and sacrifice. But there is hope, a way to break free. Elara's heart pounded fiercely. The mystery she had come to solve was no mere legend. It was a living, breathing force that pulsed beneath the surface of the garden's beauty. Later that evening, Elara wandered alone beneath the heavy bloom of the roses, the garden transformed under the silver light of the moon. The flowers seemed to glow faintly, their colors shifting between vibrant reds and shadowed hues that chilled her skin. The whisper of petals brushing against one another sounded like voices, soft, urgent, almost pleading. She paused, eyes wide, feeling the garden's heartbeat in the cool night air. A sudden rustle behind her made her turn. Rowan stepped into the moonlight, his blue eyes reflecting the pale glow. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said quietly. Elara met his gaze, the vulnerability she had glimpsed in Mara's stories mirrored in his expression. "I needed to see," she admitted, "to feel it for myself." He stepped closer, the tension between them palpable. "The garden holds more than beauty. It holds pain, my family's pain," he confessed, voice thick with memories. He reached into his jacket and produced a worn photograph, edges curled and faded. "This was my mother. She disappeared here years ago." Elara took the photo gently, her fingers trembling as she looked at the smiling woman frozen in time. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Rowan swallowed hard, the walls he usually kept around his heart beginning to crumble. "I've carried this burden alone for too long. But with you, maybe there's a chance to end it." Together, they made their way to a secluded part of the garden. Mara had revealed a moss-covered stone altar hidden beneath a canopy of thorny branches and blooming roses. The air hummed with an otherworldly energy, the scent of earth and blossoms thick and potent. Mara's words echoed in Elara's mind, a sacrifice born of love and betrayal, a curse tied to the very roots of the garden. Elara placed her hand on the cold stone, Rowan beside her doing the same. The garden seemed to exhale, the petals around them trembling as if alive. In that moment, the past and present converged, the echoes of long-forgotten sorrow reaching out through the ages. "We have to believe," Rowan said, voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. Together. Elara nodded, a fragile hope blooming in her heart. She had come seeking answers, and now faced a choice that went beyond science to embrace the magic, the pain, and the love entwined within Ravenwood's cursed roses. As they stood united before the altar, the garden whispered promises of redemption and sacrifice, of endings and new beginnings. The path ahead was uncertain, shadowed by danger and loss, but also illuminated by the fragile light of hope. And so, beneath the watchful gaze of the moon and the blooming roses, Elara and Rowan took the first steps toward breaking the cycle, their hearts beating in quiet defiance against the curse that had bound them for generations. The night deepened, and with it, the garden's secrets stirred anew, waiting for the dawn that would decide their fate. The first light of dawn spilled softly over the Ravenwood estate, illuminating the rose garden with a gentle golden hue. Elara stepped carefully along the winding stone path, her boots crunching faintly on the gravel as she moved deeper into the heart of the garden. Around her, the roses were beginning to bloom in earnest, their petals unfurling like delicate silk, vibrant and intoxicating. But there was something unusual about this morning. A strange stillness hung in the air, as if the garden itself was holding its breath. Elara paused beside a cluster of deep crimson roses, brushing her fingers lightly over the velvety petals. The scent was intoxicatingly sweet, but beneath it lay a faint bitterness that made her nose wrinkle. She closed her eyes, breathing in the fragrance, and suddenly the garden seemed to shift. The soft rustle of leaves became a susurrus, like whispered voices fluttering just beyond hearing. She opened her eyes, her heart quickening. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, turning toward the sound. A chill ran down her spine as the wind carried faint, almost imperceptible murmurs through the thorns. The whispers seemed to curl around her, intimate and secret, as if the roses themselves were trying to speak. Elara's pulse hammered in her ears, her scientific mind struggling to find a rational explanation, but none came. Instead, a wave of fascination washed over her, fear mingling with awe. Footsteps approached softly from behind, and Elara turned to see Rowan emerge from the shadows beneath an archway of blooming roses. His messy auburn hair was tousled by the breeze, and his piercing blue eyes held a grave intensity. He moved with a quiet urgency, his earth-toned clothes blending with the garden's greens and browns. "Elara," he said quietly, his voice low and steady, "you shouldn't be wandering here alone. Not now. The garden's awakening is more dangerous than you realize." She met his gaze, the earnest concern in his eyes stirring something deep within her. "I need to understand it, Rowan. This is no ordinary bloom." He stepped closer, lowering his voice further. "The curse isn't just a story anymore. It's alive and watching. Be careful where you tread." Despite the warning, Elara's curiosity was unyielding. That afternoon, as the sun climbed higher, she returned to the garden's western edge, near the gnarled old oak where the roses grew thickest. The petals here shimmered with an unnatural glow, their edges tinged with a subtle, shifting hue that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Suddenly, the air thickened around her, and a vision flickered at the edge of her sight. A shadowy figure moved among the thorns, a woman cloaked in mourning, her face veiled in sorrow. The air was heavy with the scent of wilted roses, and from somewhere distant came a mournful lullaby, haunting and fragile. Elara's breath caught in her throat. Was this a memory, a warning, or a trick of her imagination? She blinked, and the vision faded, leaving her trembling. Her hands shook as she gripped the rose bush beside her, the thorns pricking her skin, drawing a bead of blood that mingled with the soil. She pressed her palm against the earth, grounding herself, fighting the rising panic. "Elara!" Rowan's voice called out, breaking the spell. He appeared at the garden's entrance, his expression tight with worry. "What are you doing so far from the house?" "I told you it's dangerous." She looked up, their eyes locking. The fear in his gaze mirrored her own, but beneath it was something warmer, something she hadn't dared to hope for. Slowly, she rose, brushing dirt from her hands. "I had to see," she said softly, "to feel it for myself." He took a step toward her, hesitating, then reached out, his fingers brushing against hers. The contact was electric, sending a thrill through Elara despite the shadow of danger looming over them. For a moment, the garden seemed to hold its breath, the roses around them blooming with unnatural intensity, as if responding to their forbidden closeness. "We retethered to this place," Rowan murmured, "bound by secrets and sacrifices. But I don't want to lose you to it." Elara's heart surged. "Then let's face it together." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that twisted among the petals. The first bloom had awakened the garden's ancient power, and with it, a delicate, dangerous hope began to grow, one that neither of them could yet fully comprehend. As twilight settled, the whispers among the roses grew louder, threading through the air like a song of warning and longing. Elara and Rowan stood side by side, their hands entwined, ready to face the curse's dark embrace, even as the garden watched and waited. And somewhere deep within the shadows, the floral curse stirred, its sinister bloom just beginning. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the rose garden, the once vibrant blooms now tinged with a somber hue that seemed to drain the color from the air itself. Elara stood near the edge of the tangled rose, her green eyes tracing the delicate petals that fluttered in the soft breeze. She held her notebook close, fingers tightening around its worn spine as the weight of the garden's silence pressed in on her. From behind a thicket of thorny branches, a small figure emerged, Leela, Rowan's younger sister, her bright eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and fear. The girl's footsteps were light but hesitant, as if the very ground beneath her whispered warnings. She stopped beside Elara, reaching out tentatively to touch a rose whose edges curled like burnt parchment. "Do you think the garden is sick?" Leela's voice was barely above a whisper, trembling with an innocence that struck Elara to the core. Elara glanced down at the girl, noting the way her small fingers lingered over the fragile flower. "It's changing," she admitted, her voice soft but steady. "But I'm not sure why yet." Lila's gaze drifted upward to the sky, where the sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow that seemed to falter before fading into dusk. "Mom said the garden has been sad lately," she said quietly, like it's waiting for something. The mention of Rowan's mother sent a ripple through Elara's thoughts. She recalled the stories Rowan had shared, the weight of loss that clung to his family like a shadow, the burden of secrets too heavy for his young shoulders. She reached out, placing a reassuring hand on Lila's arm. "We'll figure it out," Elara promised, though a knot of unease tightened in her chest. Rowan appeared then, his tall frame moving with measured steps through the thinning light. His piercing blue eyes flicked between Leela and Elara, darkening as he took in the girl's pale face and the fragile state of the roses around them. "Leela," he said gently, wrapping an arm around her protectively, "it's going to be okay." But the lie hung between them, fragile as a petal caught in a storm. As twilight deepened, Elara found herself drawn toward the heart of the garden, where the ancient rose arbor stood like a sentinel guarding centuries of secrets. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fading blossoms, mingled with something else, an undercurrent of sorrow that prickled her skin. Her scientific mind wrestled with the inexplicable phenomena she witnessed, shadows that flickered against the fading light, whispers that seemed to drift on the breeze, calling to her in voices half-remembered. Each step forward felt heavier, as if the garden itself resisted her presence. Rowan joined her beneath the arching branches, his voice low. "It's getting worse," he admitted. "The darkness creeps further every day." Elara nodded, swallowing hard. "I want to understand it, to find a way to stop it." He looked at her then, his gaze sharp but tinged with vulnerability. "I don't want to lose you, Elara, not like before." The weight of his words settled over them, a silent acknowledgement of the curse that bound their fates. Leela's earlier words echoed in Elara's mind, the garden waiting for something, a loss that seemed inevitable. Yet beneath the fear, a fragile hope lingered, embodied in the girl's innocent trust and Rowan's fierce resolve. As night cloaked Ravenwood, the garden seemed to hold its breath, the roses' faint glow flickering like embers in the dark. Elara and Rowan stood side by side, the fragile light between them a testament to love's endurance amid encroaching shadows. But the garden was far from silent. And the darkness was not yet done with them. Under the heavy canopy of ancient rosebushes, Elara's fingers sifted through the rich soil, disturbed earth crumbling softly beneath her touch. The scent of damp earth mixed with the intoxicating fragrance of blooming roses, thick and sweet, yet somehow laced with a subtle bitterness that unsettled her. She had been drawn here by a whisper of something hidden, a secret the garden had guarded for generations. Her heart pounded as her fingers brushed against a strange texture beneath the roots, a worn leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and faded to a muted crimson, tied delicately with an equally aged ribbon. She pulled it free, brushing away dust and soil, her breath catching in her throat. The garden's past was no longer just a story told in hushed tones. It was tangible, brittle with age, yet pulsing with a dark vitality. Rowan appeared at the edge of the clearing, his auburn hair tousled, eyes sharp and shadowed with concern. "What have you found?" His voice was low but steady, laced with an urgency that made Elara look up sharply. "A journal," she said, opening the fragile cover carefully. "It looks like it belonged to one of your ancestors. There are entries here, dates, names, things about the curse." Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned the pages, the faded ink revealing a story of love, betrayal, and a sacrifice made in desperation. The words painted a vivid picture of a family torn apart, and a curse born from a wound too deep to heal. Rowan stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "I've always known the curse was tied to my family, but I never dared to learn the full story. It's painful." They sat together beneath the roses, the petals casting dappled shadows over the journal's fragile pages. Rowan's voice softened as he shared memories he had long kept buried: the disappearance of his mother, the anguish that had shaped his childhood, the burden of guarding the garden's secret. Elara listened, her scientific mind wrestling with the emotional truth laid bare. The garden was not merely a subject for study. It was a living, breathing entity entwined with the fate of those who loved within its bounds. Later, they visited Old Thumb, the garden's aged caretaker. His hands shook as he leafed through brittle documents, recounting the bitter betrayal that had fractured Rowan's lineage centuries ago. The air was thick with the scent of old parchment and dried rose petals, the weight of history pressing down on them. Elara's skepticism faltered as the lines between myth and reality blurred. The curse was no mere legend, it was a relentless force, fueled by pain and bound by ancient magic. Under the silver glow of the full moon, Elara and Rowan returned to the garden's heart. The roses shimmered unnaturally, their petals whispering secrets on the night breeze. Tension hung between them, but so did a fragile hope. They were no longer just two individuals caught in a tragic tale. They were allies, bound by a shared purpose and a growing affection that dared to defy the darkness. "We have to face this together," Rowan said quietly, his hand brushing against hers. Elara nodded, the journal clutched tightly in her other hand. For the garden, for those lost, and for us. As the night deepened, the garden seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the next chapter in its tangled roots. The moonlight cast a pale glow across the garden, illuminating the intricate lattice of thorns that curled like serpents around the ancient rose bushes. Elara's mind raced as she pieced together the fragments of history that had once been scattered and obscured by time and fear. The betrayal that had birthed the curse was no mere family quarrel, but a devastating fracture that had torn through generations, binding lovers to a fate of disappearance and despair. Her scientific instincts wrestled with the overwhelming evidence of magic woven into the garden's fabric. Rowan's presence was a steady anchor amid the swirling chaos of her thoughts. He shared more than memories. He shared his fears, his guilt, and his hope that the curse could be broken. The vulnerability in his voice was a revelation, drawing Elara closer in a way that transcended words. Their connection deepened, rooted in shared pain and a burgeoning trust that neither had expected to find. When Old Thumb revealed the ancient records, Elara was struck by the palpable weight of the past pressing into the present. The caretaker's weathered hands trembled as he recited the tale a love betrayed, a witch's curse born of heartbreak, and a sacrifice demanded in the name of protection. The garden was both prison and sanctuary, and the roses themselves were the curse's silent witnesses, blooming with a beauty that belied their sinister purpose. The night air grew thick with anticipation as Elara and Rowan stood together beneath the blooming roses, their shadows entwined among the thorns. The garden whispered around them, secrets carried on the wind, and a promise of trials yet to come. They were caught in the tangled roots of history and magic, their fates entwined with the garden's dark legacy. Elara's heart pounded with a mixture of dread and determination. Could she embrace the impossible, trust in the unseen, and fight for a love that defied the very curse threatening to consume them? The answers lay buried in the earth beneath the roses, tangled in roots both literal and metaphorical. As dawn approached, painting the sky with hues of pale gold and rose, Elara closed the journal gently. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with peril and sacrifice, but for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. Together, they would unravel the curse's secrets and face whatever darkness awaited. Yet, as the garden stirred awake, a chilling awareness settled in her bones. The curse was awakening too, more potent and unforgiving than ever before. The tangled roots of the past were reaching out, and the garden's deadly bloom was only beginning. The morning mist clung stubbornly to the dense foliage of Ravenwood's rose garden. The eerie silence broken only by the faint rustle of leaves and the occasional drip of dew from thorny branches. Elara's boots pressed lightly against the soft earth as she ventured deeper than she had before. Guided by a map of old garden plans she had found tucked away in Old Thumb's ledger. Her heart thrummed with a mixture of scientific curiosity and growing apprehension. Rowan followed close behind, his brows knit together, eyes scanning the shadows as if expecting something to leap from the darkness. They reached a narrow path overgrown with wild ivy and brambles, the roses here darker, their petals tinged with a strange, almost unnatural hue. Elara crouched to examine one particular bloom, its edges curling as if scorched by an invisible flame. "These aren't ordinary roses," she murmured, fingers gingerly tracing the delicate petals. "There's some kind of energy here, something malevolent." Rowan nodded grimly. "This is the heart of the curse. My family tried to keep it contained, but it's grown restless." Pushing aside a tangle of thorns, Elara's hand brushed against cold stone. Vines parted to reveal an ancient archway, its surface worn smooth, but still marked with faded runes that pulsed faintly under her touch. A shiver ran down her spine. "This must be the gateway," Rowan whispered, eyes darkening, "the place where the sacrifice was made centuries ago." Elara's scientific mind wrestled with the supernatural implications, but the undeniable power thrumming in the air left no room for doubt. As they stepped beneath the arch, the garden seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, a sharp cry shattered the silence. Elara spun toward the sound, heart pounding. Mara's basket lay abandoned near the edge of the hidden grove, but Mara herself was gone. Panic surged through Elara's veins. "Mara!" Rowan called, his voice tight with fear. They searched frantically, but only the whispering wind answered, carrying faint echoes of sorrow and warning. Elara's breath hitched as she clutched Rowan's arm. "The curse it's waking," Rowan's jaw clenched. "We can't let it take anyone else." Their gazes locked, a silent vow passing between them. Despite the terror that gnawed at their hearts, they would face the darkness together. The garden's veil of thorns no longer hid just beauty, it concealed a deadly secret that demanded sacrifice. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the twisted roses, Elara and Rowan steeled themselves for the battle ahead. The garden's fate and their own hung precariously in the balance. But beneath the fear, a fragile flame of hope flickered, born from a love that dared to challenge the curse itself. The path forward was uncertain, the dangers real and unforgiving. Yet Elara's resolve hardened. She would not flee. She would uncover the truth, protect those she loved, and confront whatever darkness awaited beyond the veil of thorns. Elara sat cross-legged on the woven rug in Mara's cottage, the air thick with the scent of dried lavender and rosemary. The soft crackle of the fire filled the silence as Mara carefully unfolded an ancient, brittle parchment across the wooden table. "This," she began, her voice low and reverent, "is the key to breaking the curse that has plagued Ravenwood for generations." Elara's sharp green eyes scanned the faded symbols and delicate script, her botanist's mind racing to piece together the meaning. "It's a ritual?" she asked cautiously, her voice tinged with skepticism. Mara nodded slowly, her silver hair catching the flickering candlelight. "Yes. It requires a sacrifice, yes, but more than that, it demands love and courage, the very things the curse seeks to snatch away." Elara's heart clenched at the weight of those words. For years, she had clung to science, to facts and proofs. Magic was a language she barely spoke, a theory she hesitated to accept. Yet, the inexplicable had been unfolding all around her, the roses that whispered secrets, the shadows that seemed to breathe, the disappearances that defied logic. "How can we be sure this will work?" she murmured, brushing a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear. Mara's eyes held a fierce conviction. "Because it was written by those who came before us, who knew the pain and the hope entwined in this garden. The choice is yours to believe or to falter." Meanwhile, outside beneath the silver glow of the moon, Rowan wandered the garden's labyrinthine paths. His fingers trailed along the thorny stems of the roses, each prick a sting reminding him of the family he could never fully escape. The curse was not just a legend. It was a living, breathing weight on his shoulders. He paused in the heart of the garden, where the oldest roses bloomed with an unnatural vibrancy, their petals a deep, bruised red that seemed almost to pulse with life. "I will not let this destroy us," he whispered to the night, the resolve hardening in his piercing blue eyes. Back in the cottage, Elara wrestled with the conflicting truths she faced. Her meticulous notes lay scattered across the table, botanical observations mingling with the arcane instructions Mara had shared. She flipped through pages of folklore and scientific texts alike, trying to find a bridge between the two worlds. "There has to be a rational explanation," she muttered, tracing a rose illustration with a trembling finger. But the more she searched, the more she felt the walls of her certainty crumble. Later, beneath the canopy of night, Elara and Rowan met in the garden's secluded heart. The air was heavy with the scent of blooming roses, their fragrance both intoxicating and ominous. They stood close, the unspoken fears and hopes swirling between them as vividly as the petals around their feet. "I don't know if I'm ready to believe in magic," Elara confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Rowan's gaze softened, his hand reaching out to brush a stray lock of hair from her face. "Believing isn't about readiness. It's about choosing to trust, even when everything screams otherwise." Their eyes met, a fragile bridge forming between their worlds. In that moment, the garden seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if love could truly defy the darkness. As the first faint light of dawn began to chase away the shadows, Elara felt the stirrings of a new resolve. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger, but with Rowan beside her and the ancient ritual as their guide, she dared to hope that the curse could be broken. But the garden was watching, its secrets far from fully revealed, and the price of hope was yet to be paid. The garden was alive in a way that made Elara's skin prick with both wonder and dread. Twilight had draped Ravenwood in a veil of soft purples and blues, the shadows lengthening like fingers reaching for the secrets buried beneath the soil. She found herself beneath the archways of the rose garden once again, the scent of the flowers thick and heady, almost overwhelming in the cool evening air. Rowan was already there, standing with his back to her, hands tucked into the pockets of his earth-stained trousers. His auburn hair caught the last golden rays of the sun, setting it aflame like a halo. When he turned, his piercing blue eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You came," he said, his voice low and steady, carrying the weight of unspoken worries and hope. Elara stepped forward, the dirt streaked him of her blouse brushing against the foliage. "I wouldn't miss it." They moved beneath the rose arches, where blooms cascaded like waterfalls of crimson and gold. The silence between them was thick, a fragile thread stretched taut with emotion. Elara's heart hammered, each beat echoing the tumult of thoughts she had tried to silence since arriving at Ravenwood. "I've been holding back," Rowan confessed, his gaze dropping to their nearly touching hands. "Because I'm afraid of what happens if we don't." Elara swallowed hard, the scientist in her battling the woman in love, afraid of disappearing. She whispered. He nodded, a shadow crossing his features. "But also afraid of never feeling this, whatever this is, because of the curse." Her fingers brushed against his, tentative at first, then with growing certainty. The moment they touched, a ripple passed through the garden. The roses around them shivered, petals unfurling faster than nature should allow, glowing faintly in the dimming light. The unnatural bloom seemed to pulse with life, as if fed by the power of their connection. Elara looked up into Rowan's eyes, reading the same mixture of longing and fear mirrored there. "Is this the curse responding?" she murmured. He exhaled slowly, closing the gap between them. "Or maybe it's the garden acknowledging us." Their hands clasped fully now, warmth radiating between them. Elara's fingers traced the line of his jaw, marveling at how real he was, how present in this moment despite the shadow looming over them. The garden's scent enveloped them, a rush of floral sweetness tinged with something wild and ancient. "I don't want to run away," she admitted, voice trembling but fierce. "Not from you, not from this." Rowan's lips brushed hers, tentative, testing boundaries that had been drawn long before their time. The kiss deepened, a mingling of desperation and hope, soft and fierce all at once. Around them, the roses bloomed with unnatural intensity, petals shimmering like embers in the gathering darkness. Suddenly, a soft rustle stirred the garden's edge. Mara emerged quietly, her silver hair catching the moonlight as she approached with a gentle smile. "The garden listens," she said softly, her eyes twinkling with ancient knowledge. "And it feels your courage." Elara pulled back slightly, breathless. "But what does it mean for us?" Mara's gaze was steady. "It means the curse knows you here, and it will test you. But love, true love, is a powerful force, perhaps the most potent magic of all." Rowan squeezed Elara's hand. "Then we face it together." The garden seemed to hold its breath, the roses glowing ever brighter, as if offering their blessing and warning in equal measure. Elara felt the weight of the moment settle around her. This was no longer just a scientific inquiry or a whispered legend. It was a living, breathing battle of heart and fate. As the stars emerged overhead, the garden pulsed with life and danger intertwined. Elara and Rowan stood united, their forbidden touch a beacon in the darkness, daring the curse to challenge their love. But deep beneath the soil, where roots tangled with secrets and shadows, the floral curse stirred, awakened by the promise of a love that refused to be silenced. And so the dance of roses and ash continued, their story unfolding with every forbidden touch. Elara's footsteps echoed softly on the worn wooden floor as she stepped into Mara's herbalist cottage, the scent of dried herbs and earth greeting her like an old friend. The warm glow of candles flickered against the walls lined with jars of fragrant blossoms and roots, casting dancing shadows that seemed to whisper secrets from centuries past. Mara sat quietly by the hearth, her silver hair catching the firelight as she looked up with eyes full of ancient knowledge and quiet sorrow. "Elara," Mara began, her voice a gentle murmur yet weighted with gravity, "there is more you must understand about the curse that clings to these roses. It is not merely a tale to frighten children or a superstition to dismiss. The garden demands a price, one that is paid in blood and sacrifice." Elara felt her breath hitch, the words settling deep in her chest like a stone. She had hoped the curse was a dark metaphor, a tragic myth twisted by time. But Mara's steady gaze bore into her, unwavering and resolute. "Sacrifice," Elara whispered, her fingers tightening around the edge of the wooden table. "What kind of sacrifice?" Mara's eyes darkened with the weight of memory. Long ago, a lover's betrayal birthed this curse, and since then, each summer demands a life in exchange for the garden's bloom. Those who love here too deeply risk vanishing, becoming part of the garden's sorrowful legacy. The room felt suddenly colder, the shadows growing longer as Mara's words settled like a shroud over Elara's thoughts. She swallowed, fighting the rising panic that threatened to unravel her resolve. Later that evening, under a sky brushed with the fading hues of twilight, Elara found herself near the garden's wrought iron gates. The scent of roses was heavy, intoxicating, yet laced with something more sinister beneath their delicate petals. A figure approached through the dimming light, his footsteps sure and determined. "Nathan." "Elara," Nathan called softly but with urgency, his brow furrowed in concern. "You have to leave this place. You don't know what you're risking. The stories aren't just stories. People disappear here. I don't want to lose you too." His earnest eyes searched hers, pleading for understanding. But Elara's heart throbbed with conflict. She knew the danger. She felt it pulsing in the very air she breathed. Yet the pull to uncover the truth, to protect Rowan and the garden, was stronger than fear. "I can't just walk away," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil. "Not when I'm so close. Not when the answers might save more than just me." Nathan's shoulders slumped, but his hand reached out, briefly touching hers, a silent promise of care and warning. Alone again, Elara wandered through the rose garden, the twilight wrapping around her like a velvet cloak. The air was thick with the scent of blossoms, but beneath it hummed a subtle, almost imperceptible whisper, a chorus of warnings from the roses themselves. Each petal seemed to quiver with unspoken fear and longing, as if the garden remembered every lost soul. Her footsteps took her to the ancient stone altar hidden among thorny vines, a relic from a time long forgotten yet central to the curse's power. There, Rowan appeared, his presence as steady and reassuring as the earth beneath their feet. He looked at her with eyes that held storms and secret pain, his auburn hair tousled by the gentle evening breeze. "You shouldn't be here alone," he murmured, his voice low and earnest. Elara met his gaze, her own conflicted but resolute. "I have to know what this curse wants from us, what it takes." Rowan stepped closer, the weight of his family's legacy pressing between them. "It demands sacrifice. Not just any sacrifice, but one that tests the depths of love and courage." Their hands brushed, a spark of warmth amid the chilling knowledge. In that moment, beneath the blooming roses glowing faintly in the moonlight, their shared fear and hope entwined, binding them in a fragile promise to face the darkness together. But as the night deepened, so did the shadows around them. Whispers carried on the wind, warning of dangers yet to come, and Elara knew the path ahead was fraught with peril. Could love truly conquer a curse born of betrayal and blood? Or was she destined to become another whisper among the thorns? The garden watched silently, its roses blooming with unnatural intensity, as Elara made her choice, one that would test her heart and soul beyond anything she had ever imagined. The greenhouse was cloaked in a soft twilight glow, shadows stretched long over the rows of roses that stood like silent sentinels. Alara's breath caught in her throat as Rowan's voice broke the heavy silence, each word steeped in a painful history he had guarded for so long. "You deserve to know the truth," Rowan began, his piercing blue eyes locking with hers, unwavering despite the weight of what he was about to reveal. "The curse that haunts this garden isn't just a myth or a warning told to scare children away. It's the legacy of my family, born from a betrayal so deep it stained the soil itself." Alara's fingers tightened around her notebook, the pages fluttering as if eager to capture every fragment of his confession. "Tell me," she whispered, the scientist in her wrestling with the dread blossoming in her chest. Rowan inhaled sharply, the scent of damp earth and blooming petals mingling with the rawness in his voice. "Centuries ago, the original gardener fell in love with a witch, a woman whose magic was entwined with the floral world. Their love was fierce but forbidden, a secret whispered only by the roses. When betrayal shattered their bond, the witch cursed the garden, binding it with a dark magic that would claim every lover who walked its paths come summer's bloom. The story unfolded like a tapestry woven with threads of love, pain, and vengeance. Each lover lost was a sacrifice to the curse's insatiable hunger, a cruel price paid to protect the garden from further betrayal. Rowan's ancestors had tried to contain it, but the curse was relentless, a living thing fed by the passion and despair of those ensnared. Alara's heart pounded, the rational part of her mind struggling against the undeniable truth laid bare. The roses outside seemed to lean closer, their crimson petals glowing faintly in the fading light, as if alive with secrets. A soft rustle interrupted their reverie. Mara stepped into the greenhouse, her silver hair catching the last rays of sunlight. Her eyes, deep pools of wisdom and sorrow, met Elara's with a knowing look. "The curse demands a sacrifice," Mara said gently, her voice steady yet mournful. "It's not just a story. It's a bond sealed by blood and grief. Every summer, when the roses bloom fullest, the curse awakens, and lovers vanish, pulled into the garden's shadow." Elara swallowed hard, the pieces falling into place with painful clarity. The whispers she had dismissed, the warnings from villagers, the strange occurrences in the garden, none were coincidence. She reached out, her fingers brushing a single rose petal. It was soft, yet vibrant, the crimson hue pulsing faintly like a heartbeat under her touch. It was as if the rose carried the very essence of the curse, beautiful and deadly entwined. Outside, a sudden breeze swept through the garden, sending petals swirling in an ethereal dance around them. The air was thick with scent, and something darker, an unspoken warning, carried on the wind. Rowan's confession hung heavily between them, a fragile thread binding their fates. "Love here," Rowan said, voice barely above a whisper, "is a risk. To be with me with this garden means risking vanishing like those before us." Elara's mind raced, torn between the pull of her feelings and the harsh reality of the curse. The garden's beauty was a veil for its deadly legacy, and their love was caught in the eye of a storm as old as the roses themselves. She looked into Rowan's eyes, searching for answers, for hope. But all she found was the weight of centuries pressing down on them both. The night deepened, and with it, the garden seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the choice. Elara would make a choice that would decide not only their love, but the fate of every soul bound to Ravenwood's rose-laden paths. "I don't know how to fight something like this," Elara said finally, voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. Rowan reached for her hand, his touch warm amid the chill of the encroaching night. "Then we fight it together. Because if love is our curse, then maybe it can be our salvation too." The roses bloomed around them, brilliant and ominous, their petals whispering secrets of sacrifice and hope as the garden waited for the next chapter of its haunting tale to unfold. The sky hung low and heavy over Ravenwood, bruised with the fading light of dusk as Elara stepped onto the winding path that led to the garden's heart. The roses were at their fullest bloom now, petals unfurling with an almost unnatural vibrancy that tinged the air with a heavy, intoxicating scent. It was a perfume both beautiful and suffocating, wrapping around her like a silken shroud, whispering secrets she was only beginning to understand. Rowan was already there, standing still among the thorns and blooms, his sharp blue eyes tracing the horizon as if searching for something unseen. His auburn hair was tousled by the evening breeze, and the earth-toned clothes he wore clung to his strong frame, grounding him to the soil he tended. When he spotted her, a faint smile softened his usually guarded expression. "You came," he said, voice low but steady. "I wasn't sure you would." Elara swallowed, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. "I had to. I can't run from this, not anymore." Around them, the garden seemed to breathe, the roses pulsing with a dark energy that both fascinated and frightened her. Every petal shimmered with a deadly allure, the vibrant reds and pinks deepening into shadows at their edges, as if the flowers themselves bore the curse's mark. The legend that had haunted Ravenwood for centuries was no mere story, it was a living, breathing force, and it was awakening. Rowan stepped closer, the scent of earth and rose mingling with the warmth radiating from his skin. "The curse grows stronger each day," he murmured. "I've felt it clawing at the edges of the garden, at my family, at you. But we won't face it alone." Elara's heart quickened, a mixture of fear and hope. They both knew the stakes. The curse demanded a sacrifice, an ancient, terrible payment for a love once betrayed. And yet Rowan's unwavering presence gave her strength. Later that evening, in the small, cozy cottage that Mara called home, the air was thick with candlelight and the scent of herbs. Mara's silver hair caught the flickering flames as she unfolded dusty, ancient texts across the wooden table. Her hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from the urgency of what she revealed. "The ritual," Mara explained, voice barely above a whisper, "is our only hope. It requires a sacrifice, yes, but also a bond forged in love and courage. The garden will fight, but you must stand together." Elara's fingers traced the faded script, her mind racing. Science and logic warred with the undeniable magic woven through the words. Could she really trust this? Could she believe that love would be their weapon? Outside, the garden throbbed with latent power. The roses seemed to pulse, their colors shifting subtly in the candlelight that spilled through the window, casting fluttering shadows on the walls. Nathan's arrival the next day shattered the fragile calm. His face was tight with worry as he confronted Elara in the garden's edge, the tension between them crackling like static. "You have to leave," he urged, voice strained. "This curse, it's not something you can fight. I've seen what it does. You're risking everything your life." Elara met his gaze, fierce and unwavering. "I'm not running, Nathan, not this time." Frustration and fear warred in Nathan's eyes, but he nodded, knowing she had made her choice. As twilight descended once more, Elara found herself back in the garden's center, Rowan by her side. The roses glowed faintly, almost as if responding to their shared resolve. He reached for her hands, their fingers intertwining with a quiet strength. "Whatever comes," Rowan said, "we face it together." The garden's shadows deepened, but so did their resolve. In the crossroads of fate, love and sacrifice would be their guide. The night settled over Ravenwood, thick with promise and peril, and as the last light faded from the sky, Elara knew the choice she had made would change everything, either breaking the curse or binding them forever to the garden's dark legacy. But for now, there was only the moment heavy with rose-scented air, whispered vows, and the steady beat of two hearts daring to defy destiny. The path ahead was uncertain, but Elara was no longer alone, and that made all the difference. The garden had never seemed so alive or so menacing. As Elara stepped cautiously through the wending paths flanked by roses that bloomed with unnatural vigor, the air thickened, charged with an energy she could neither explain nor ignore. The sun fought to pierce through the heavy canopy, but shadows clung to the petals and thorns like dark stains. Rowan followed close behind, his usual calm replaced by a taut alertness that made Elara's heart pound in sympathy. A sudden gust swept through the garden, rustling leaves, and sending a cascade of rose petals swirling around them like spectral dancers. The petals glittered momentarily in the sunlight before settling eerily on the ground, as if the garden itself breathed with a sinister pulse. Elara's sharp green eyes scanned their surroundings, catching movement in the corner of her vision, a shadow darting just beyond the tree line. She swallowed hard, the stories of vanished lovers no longer feeling like distant folklore, but a dark reality pressing down on her. "The curse is waking," Rowan murmured, his voice low and steady, yet edged with urgency. "It's growing stronger," Elara nodded, fighting the instinct to flee. Instead, she clenched her fists, reminding herself why she had come here: to understand, to protect, to fight. The garden was a beautiful prison, and the key to its chains lay hidden somewhere in the ancient lore Rowan had begun to share. But knowledge alone wouldn't be enough. That evening, they found themselves in Mara's cottage, a sanctuary of warmth and wisdom against the encroaching darkness. The room was dimly lit by flickering candles, their soft glow dancing across shelves lined with jars of herbs, dried flowers, and weathered books. Mara sat at the wooden table, spreading out fragile scrolls covered in faded script and ancient symbols. "This is what we must do," Mara explained, her silver hair catching the light as she pointed to a passage describing a ritual to contain the curse's power. "But it requires more than words. It demands strength of body, mind, and heart." Elara traced the symbols with trembling fingers, feeling the weight of the garden's history press upon her. Rowan leaned in, his piercing blue eyes fixed on the text, determination hardening his features. "We don't have much time," Rowan said. "With each day the roses bloom fuller, the curse tightens its grip. We must prepare." Back in the garden, twilight brought no relief. The fading light cast long, shifting shadows that seemed to wreathe among the bushes. Elara heard it then, a faint, haunting melody carried on the breeze, the echo of a lover's lament lost to time. Goosebumps rose on her arms as the garden whispered its sorrow and rage. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Rowan nodded, his jaw clenched. "It's a warning." They moved quickly, Rowan tending to a rose bush battered by a sudden frost that left its leaves blackened and brittle. Elara knelt beside him, placing a charm Mara had given her into the soil. The earth seemed to pulse beneath her hands, fragile yet alive. "This garden," Rowan said quietly, "is both our prison and our battleground." Elara looked up at him, her green eyes reflecting the last light of dusk. "Then we fight. Together." The night deepened, wrapping Ravenwood in a cloak of silence and shadow. Somewhere deep within the garden's heart, the curse stirred, sensing the defiance blossoming against it. But for the first time, Elara and Rowan felt a fragile hope, a promise that even in the darkest bloom, light could take root. As they prepared for the trials ahead, neither could guess the full cost that breaking the curse would demand, or the sacrifices they would have to make to save the garden and each other. The shadows lengthened, but so did their resolve. The final confrontation was drawing near, and with it, the hope that the garden's deadly cycle might finally be broken. Yet lurking just beyond the edge of the light, danger waited, relentless, patient, and hungry. Elara tightened her grip on Rowan's hand, a silent vow passing between them. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side, hearts intertwined amid the shadows in the bloom. Elara sat cross-legged on the worn wooden floor of Mara's cottage, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows against the walls lined with jars of dried herbs and ancient tomes. The air was thick with the scent of lavender and sage, mingling with the faint musk of old paper. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the faded script on a brittle page, the words revealing a truth more harrowing than she had dared imagine. "The curse," Mara began gently, her silver hair cascading over her shoulders like a waterfall of moonlight, "is not simply a spell to be undone with herbs or rituals alone. It demands a sacrifice, one that reaches beyond the physical. It requires the surrender of something deeply personal, a piece of the soul itself." Elara's breath caught in her throat. She looked up, her sharp green eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning understanding. "A soul's sacrifice. But what does that mean?" Mara's gaze softened, the lines on her face telling stories of pain and wisdom. "It manifests differently for each who attempts to break it. For some, it is a loss of memory, others, a part of their essence forever bound to the garden. The original curse was born of heartbreak and betrayal. Its undoing must echo the depth of that pain." The weight of Mara's words settled over Elara like a heavy fog. She thought of the childhood friend she had lost, the unexplained disappearance that had haunted her every step. The garden's roses, now in full bloom, seemed to pulse with a sinister life, their vibrant petals hiding a darkness that could consume her. Later that evening, under the twilight sky where shadows danced among the roses, Rowan joined her near the ancient stone altar hidden deep within the garden's heart. His messy auburn hair was tousled by the gentle breeze, and his piercing blue eyes held a storm of emotions. "I've carried this burden alone for too long," he confessed, his voice low and strained. "My mother vanished to this curse, and I've lived every day haunted by the fear that I'll lose you the same way." Elara reached out, her hand finding his, their fingers intertwining amid the thorny branches. "We're in this together," she whispered, though the tremor in her voice betrayed the fear gnawing at her. The garden seemed to respond, the roses around them glowing with an unnatural light, their scent intoxicating yet ominous. The air was thick with the promise of danger and the fragile hope that love might yet prevail. Days passed with restless nights and whispered plans. Elara found herself wandering alone beneath the rain-soaked roses, droplets cascading down her cheeks, indistinguishable from tears. Memories of loss surged through her, the vanished friend, the empty spaces left behind. The burden of sacrifice was no longer abstract. It was an imminent reality that demanded courage she wasn't sure she possessed. As the day of the ritual approached, Mara's warnings echoed in her mind. "Be prepared to give all, Elara. The garden will claim what it needs, and only with true surrender can the cycle be broken." In the final moments before the ritual, Elara and Rowan stood side by side at the altar. Their hands were clasped tightly, hearts pounding in unison. The garden around them held its breath, the roses glowing with a sinister yet beautiful light. Whatever happens, Rowan said, his voice steady despite the shadows in his eyes, we face it together. Elara nodded, drawing strength from his presence. For love, we will pay any price. As they began the incantations, a wind stirred the petals, and the garden seemed to awaken with a fierce energy. The price of love was about to be paid, and the fate of Ravenwood hung in the balance. On the brink of the ritual, with Elara and Rowan's intertwined hopes and fears setting the stage for a confrontation that will test the limits of their love and sacrifice. The air was thick with a heavy silence as Elara followed Mara deeper into the heart of the Ravenwood rose garden. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting a bruised purple light over the tangled branches and thorny vines. Each step Elara took stirred the scent of crushed petals and damp earth, a fragrance both intoxicating and ominous. Rowan walked beside her, his usual guarded expression softened by the flickering light and the weight of the moment. "This is where it all began," Mara whispered, her voice a fragile thread weaving through the stillness. "The heart of the curse." Elara's fingers brushed against the curled edge of a dark crimson rose, its petals thicker and more velvety than any she had ever studied. But beneath their beauty lurked a sinister pulse, an almost imperceptible tremor that sent a shiver racing through her skin. "Are we ready?" Rowan asked quietly, his voice low but steady, his piercing blue eyes locked onto hers, reflecting the fading light and a storm of emotions beneath. Elara nodded, swallowing the knot of fear tightening in her throat. "We have to be, for everyone who vanished here before us, for the chance to end this nightmare." Mara arranged a circle of herbs and ancient stones carefully around them, each element humming with a quiet power. She began to chant, the words lilting and strange, a melody that seemed to awaken the very soil beneath their feet. Rowan took Elara's hand, grounding her with his warmth. The garden responded almost immediately. The roses trembled, petals quivering as if caught in an invisible wind. A sudden gust whipped through the clearing, carrying a chorus of whispers that sounded like forgotten voices pleading and warning. Elara's heart pounded as shadows stretched and twisted among the vines. The roses darkened rapidly, their vibrant reds bleeding into deep purples and blacks. Thorns lengthened and sharpened, scraping the air with a metallic rasp. "It's fighting us," Rowan growled, tightening his grip on Elara's hand. "The curse doesn't want to end." She swallowed her fear, recalling every lesson she had learned, every note she'd taken about the garden's history and magic. Closing her eyes, she focused on the warmth of Rowan's hand, on the promise they shared. Then, opening her palm, she revealed the sacred herb Mara had given her, a fragment of ancient hope. Together, Elara said firmly, beginning to chant the incantation Mara had taught them. Her voice wavered at first, but grew stronger, weaving through the chaos like a lifeline. The garden seemed to scream in response. Thorns lashed out, vines writhed, and the earth itself trembled beneath their feet. But Rowan's steady presence bolstered her resolve. He stepped forward, placing a protective hand over the circle, his own voice joining hers in the ancient words. Time blurred as the ritual reached its fevered peak. The roses exploded in a burst of blinding light, petals scattering like embers caught in a storm. The darkness recoiled, retreating into the soil and shadows. When the light faded, the garden was still. The roses, once twisted and sinister, now glimmered faintly with a soft, hopeful glow. Elara gasped, breathless. Rowan's eyes shone with unshed tears and fierce triumph. Mara smiled gently, her eyes reflecting the stars beginning to pierce the night sky. "The cycle has begun to break," she murmured. "But the cost is not yet fully known." Elara met Rowan's gaze, their bond fortified by pain and hope. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in centuries, the garden's curse was no longer an unyielding prison. "We'll face whatever comes," Rowan said, voice thick with emotion. "Together." And as the roses whispered their ancient secrets into the night, Elara knew that love, fragile, rebellious love, was their strongest weapon against the darkness. But deep beneath the soil, the curse stirred, unwilling to surrender without a final, terrible reckoning. The night held its breath, waiting. The battle for Ravenwood was only just beginning. The evening air hung heavy over Ravenwood, thick with the scent of roses and an unspoken tension that clung to every petal and thorn. Elara's boots crunched softly on the gravel path winding through the garden, eyes scanning the darkening foliage with growing unease. The sun had long dipped below the horizon, casting the estate into a dim twilight that seemed to amplify every whisper of the wind and every rustle of leaves. Rowan had been restless all day, his usual calm shattered by an inexplicable dread she felt creeping into her own bones. Leela's been missing for hours. Rowan's voice broke through the silence as he approached, his piercing blue eyes shadowed by worry. I searched every corner of the garden and the nearby woods. There's no sign of her. Elara's heart clenched. It was impossible to believe that the curse had taken someone so young, so innocent. The garden had claimed lovers before, but a child. The thought was too cruel to grasp. Together, they began a desperate search under the fading light. Elara's sharp green eyes caught a flash of color something red caught in the thorns near the old fountain. She moved closer, heart pounding, and saw it was Leela's scarf, frayed and stained with dirt. The realization hit like a cold wave. The curse was no longer just a legend or a threat to lovers. It was a relentless force, hungry and merciless. Rowan's hands trembled as he reached out to touch the scarf. She was here, he murmured, voice thick with anguish. I should have protected her. Elara placed a steadying hand on his arm. We'll find her. We have to. The garden, once a place of delicate beauty, now felt like a labyrinth of shadows. The roses, illuminated faintly by the moonlight, seemed to pulse with a sinister life of their own. Their vibrant reds darkened to almost black, petals curling as if in silent agony. The air was thick with the heavy perfume of death and magic intertwined. As they scoured the garden, a soft voice called out from the edge of the grove. Mara appeared, her silver hair catching the moonlight, her expression grave. I feared this night would come, she said quietly, stepping closer. The curse demands a sacrifice, and it grows stronger with each bloom. Elara's breath caught. Is there no way to stop it, to bring Lila back? Mara's eyes, wise and burdened, met hers. The sacrifice is the price for the curse's power. If we do not break the cycle, more will vanish. The weight of Mara's words settled over them like a shroud. Elara felt the sting of tears and the fierce, atching pull of helplessness. Yet beneath the despair, a fierce determination took root. If the curse could claim Leela, it could claim Rowan, or her. They had to fight to find the strength to break free. Night deepened, and the garden seemed to close in around Elara as she stood in the heart of the rose labyrinth. The roses glowed faintly, their petals shifting through ominous hues, deep crimson to midnight black, as if alive with the curse's dark magic. The wind whispered secrets, voices almost audible among the thorns. Her fingers brushed the rough bark of a rosebush, grounding herself in the moment, fighting the rising tide of fear. We will end this, she whispered into the night air, not just to the garden, but to herself and to Rowan, wherever he was. We will bring her back. But the garden held its silence, the final petal hanging heavy in the dark, a silent challenge to their courage and love. Outside the garden walls, the village slept uneasily, unaware of the darkness blooming once more within Ravenwood. The curse's grip tightened, and the dance of love and loss spun ever onward, with Elara and Rowan caught in its merciless embrace. The night was far from over, and the true test of their hearts was only just beginning. The heart of Ravenwood's garden was unlike anything Elara had ever seen. As twilight descended, the roses surrounding her shifted in hue from their usual vibrant reds and pinks to shades that seemed almost otherworldly, deep crimsons darkening to black, then fading into ghostly whites. The air was thick with an eerie stillness, broken only by the soft rustle of petals and the faintest whispers carried on a chilling breeze. It was as if the garden itself was breathing, holding its breath in anticipation. Elara's pulse quickened, every instinct screaming both caution and curiosity. She clutched the small bundle of herbs Mara had given her, a talisman against the curse, but it felt fragile, almost insignificant here. The stories she had heard from the villagers, the warnings from Nathan, even the secrets Rowan had reluctantly shared, all led to this moment. The confrontation with the source of the curse. A flicker of movement caught her eye amidst the roses. From the swirling petals emerged a figure, its form shifting like smoke caught in a breeze. It was neither fully solid nor entirely ephemeral, translucent yet undeniable. Elara's breath caught as the shape coalesced into the mournful visage of a woman, her hair flowing like tendrils of shadow, eyes deep pools of sorrow and rage. This was the lovelorn witch, the origin of the floral curse, a spirit bound to Ravenwood by betrayal and heartbreak centuries ago. The apparition's voice was both a whisper and a sigh, echoing through the garden like a lament. "Why do you come, mortal?" "To join the others who vanished beneath these roses," it asked, the words thick with centuries of pain. Elara stepped forward, the dirt stained hem of her coat brushing against thorny stems. "I come not to join, but to understand," she said, her voice steady despite the fear threading through her veins. "Your pain is clear, your sorrow deep. But this suffering, does it have to continue?" Behind her, Rowan's steady presence was a balm. He reached out, taking her hand in his, grounding her in the tangible warmth of human connection. His blue eyes held fierce determination, a promise that she was not alone in this fight. The witch's form wavered, petals swirling violently as the garden itself seemed to pulse with a malignant heartbeat. Thorns twisted and creaked, the ground trembling beneath their feet as if the earth wished to swallow them whole. Yet Elara stood firm, drawing on every ounce of courage and empathy she possessed. The curse was born from betrayal, the spirit whispered, a sacrifice made in love and despair. It binds the garden and those who dare to love within it, trapping them in an endless cycle of loss. Elara's mind raced, piecing together the fragments Mara had shared, the sacrifices, the vanished lovers, the legacy Rowan bore. If love caused this pain, she murmured, then love must be the key to breaking it. She spoke then not with spells or incantations, but with words of forgiveness and hope. She acknowledged the witch's sorrow, the betrayal that had chained her spirit, offering release through understanding rather than vengeance. Rowan squeezed her hand, his silent encouragement fueling her resolve. Slowly, the curse's form faltered, the sinister glow of the roses dimming as the garden exhaled a breath it had held for centuries. Dawn's first light broke through the twisted branches, casting a gentle golden glow over the landscape. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced by a fragile peace. But the victory was bittersweet. Elara knew this was but a step in a longer journey. The curse's demands had been revealed, the price still to be paid. Yet in the heart of the garden, surrounded by fading thorns and softening petals, the seeds of hope had been planted. As the morning birds began their song, Elara and Rowan stood together, united against the darkness that had haunted Ravenwood. Their love, tested by fear and sacrifice, now shone as a beacon, fragile, bright, and enduring. And somewhere deep within the garden, the curse watched, waiting for the next move in this ancient dance of love and loss. The air was dense with the scent of damp earth and the faint, sickly sweetness of roses past their prime, curling and darkening beneath the twilight sky of Ravenwood. At the heart of the garden, where the oldest roses had bloomed for centuries, Elara and Rowan stood side by side, their breaths shallow, hands joined with trembling certainty. Mara, the silver-haired herbalist, circled them slowly, her voice rising in a low chant, weaving words older than any of them had lived, threading magic and hope into the fading petals that carpeted the ground. Elara's eyes flicked nervously to the stone altar, before them a slab worn smooth by time, carved with symbols that pulsed faintly with a pale light. The very air crackled with a charged expectancy, as if the garden itself was holding its breath. Rowan's face was set, calm and resolute beneath his messy auburn hair, his piercing blue eyes locked on the ceremonial knife, resting beside the altar. The blade gleamed, catching the last rays of dying sunlight, a sharp contrast to the wilting roses that surrounded them. "Are you certain?" Elara whispered, her voice barely audible over the rising wind that stirred the thorny branches, their whispers almost human in their mournfulness. Rowan nodded, a quiet fire burning in his gaze. "I have carried this burden for too long. It ends tonight." Mara's chant deepened, her hands weaving through the air, drawing unseen sigils of protection. The sacrifice must be willing, and the bond unbroken. "Only then will the curse unravel," she intoned solemnly. Elara's heart clenched as Rowan extended his hand toward the knife. The moment felt suspended in time, the weight of generations pressing down on them. She reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed against Rowan's palm, steadying him. "We'll face this together," she vowed. With a breath that was both steady and shuddering, Rowan grasped the knife and pressed its cold edge to his skin. A sharp sting blossomed, crimson droplets welling and then falling onto the altar, mingling with the brittle petals. The garden seemed to exhale a shiver coursing through the air, the roses' vibrant colors dimming as if drained of their lifeblood. Elara felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them back. The ritual was far from over, and their sacrifice was only the beginning. Mara stepped forward, her voice rising in a crescendo that echoed through the garden, weaving threads of ancient magic that wrapped around Elara and Rowan, binding their souls to the land and to each other. "The curse knows pain," Mara said, her eyes gleaming with unshed tears. "It feeds on love and loss, but love can also be its undoing." As the last notes of the chant faded, a gust of wind swept through the garden, carrying with it the scent of ashes and wilted blooms. The roses trembled, petals cascading down like delicate rain, carpeting the earth in a blanket of fading beauty. It was a sign the curse was weakening, but the cost was etched deeply into their hearts. Elara turned to Rowan, their hands still entwined, feeling the pulse of his blood mingling with hers, a tangible proof of their shared fate. "What happens now?" she asked softly, the weight of uncertainty pressing down. Rowan's gaze softened, the pain and hope intertwining in his expression. "Now, we wait and heal. The garden will change, and so will we." But this, he gestured to the withering roses, "this is the first step toward freedom." A silence settled between them, profound and sacred, as the garden settled into its new state. The curse's grip was loosening, but its shadows would linger, reminding them of the sacrifices made and the love that had conquered darkness. Elara's mind raced with questions, but for the first time in many seasons, hope blossomed, a fragile, tentative thing, like the first green shoot pushing through ash. Their story was far from over, but in that moment, beneath the withering roses, they found strength in each other, ready to face whatever dawn awaited. And as night fell over Ravenwood, the garden whispered its secrets once more, but this time they spoke of salvation rather than sorrow. The dawn crept slowly over Ravenwood, painting the sky in pale hues of lavender and gold that spilled like a gentle promise across the scarred earth. Elara stood at the edge of the garden, her breath shallow and heart aching with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and fading roses, no longer the vibrant reds and pinks that had once dazzled the eye, but muted shades of soft pink-white and the faintest blush of decay. The garden was alive but changed, a fragile whisper of what had been and what could be. Rowan's hand found hers, warm and steady despite the tremble of the morning chill. His gaze swept over the garden with a quiet reverence, eyes reflecting the lingering shadows of loss yet alight with something new hope. "It's different," he murmured, voice low, as if afraid to shatter the fragile peace. "It is," Elara agreed, squeezing his hand, "but it feels lighter. Like the weight has lifted, even if the scars remain." Together, they stepped into the garden's heart, where the roses no longer held their deadly secret. The petals, once sharp and glowing with unnatural life, now drooped gently, touched by the soft fingers of dawn and the promise of rest. The thorns still prickled the skin, a reminder of the past, but their menace had dulled. Elara's fingertips brushed a fallen petal, delicate as a sigh, and she let it slip through her fingers, watching it drift to the soil below. Behind them, the village of Ravenwood stirred. Mara stood by the edge of the garden, her silver hair catching the first rays of sunlight as she spoke quietly to a gathering of villagers. Her voice was soft but sure, carrying stories of the past tales of love, loss, and sacrifice that had once bound them all in fear. Now, her words were threads of healing, weaving the community back together. The villagers listened intently, eyes wide with cautious optimism, the old walls of suspicion beginning to crumble. Nathan approached the group, his face etched with the lines of worry now softened by understanding. When his gaze met Elara's, he offered a tentative smile born of respect and reluctant admiration. "You were right to stay," he admitted, voice low. "I didn't want to see you get hurt. But you've changed things here." Elara nodded, a bittersweet smile crossing her lips. "We all have." Leela, Rowan's younger sister, burst through the crowd with unrestrained laughter, her youthful energy a stark contrast to the heavy memories that had once clouded the garden. She darted through the pathways with a freedom that spoke louder than words, a symbol of new beginnings and the lifting of shadows that had long haunted her family. As the sun rose higher, casting golden beams through the skeletal branches, Elara and Rowan stood together, their silhouettes entwined against the backdrop of a garden that was healing. They had made sacrifices that cut deep, their love tempered by loss but strengthened by hope. The roses might have turned to ash, but from those ashes, something new was growing, something fragile, something beautiful. Elara's thoughts drifted to the future, to the life that awaited beyond the cursed boundaries of Ravenwood. She would carry the memory of the garden's dark legacy, but it would no longer chain her. Rowan's steady presence at her side was a reminder that love, even when forged in pain, could endure and blossom anew. The villagers began to emerge from their homes, tentative smiles replacing wary glances. Conversations sparked, laughter echoed softly, and the old fears that had gripped Ravenwood slowly loosened their hold. Mara's wisdom, Nathan's protection, and Lila's youthful spirit were the first rays of light breaking through years of darkness. Elara knelt by a patch of roses, now pale and fragile, and gently pressed a hand to the earth. "We've ended the curse," she whispered. "But the garden will always hold its stories." Rowan knelt beside her, his blue eyes reflecting the dawn's light. "And we'll make sure those stories are ones of hope and healing from now on." The garden breathed around them, alive with the echoes of the past and the promise of tomorrow. It was a beginning, painful, imperfect, but theirs. As they rose, the wind stirred the petals, carrying them softly away like whispered blessings. Elara and Rowan walked forward, hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future held, their hearts intertwined in a love forged through darkness and now blossoming in the light. But as the last petal fell, a faint chill lingered on the breeze, a reminder that some shadows, no matter how faint, never fully fade away. And so, with renewed strength and fragile hope, their story continued. The morning light spilled gently across the garden, casting a golden glow that seemed to breathe life into every petal and leaf. Elara stood at the edge of the newly tilled soil, her green eyes tracing the contours of a cluster of freshly bloomed roses. The scent was intoxicating, a blend of earth, dew, and something indefinably magical that seemed to hum beneath the surface. She knelt, brushing her fingers against the delicate veins of a rose petal, feeling its softness, its fragility. The garden, once a place of whispered fears and shadowed secrets, now vibrated with a quiet promise. Rowan appeared at her side, his auburn hair tousled by the morning breeze, blue eyes reflecting the calm strength that had grown within him over these past months. He watched her silently, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Looks like you've found a friend," he said softly. Elara looked up, her smile tentative but genuine. "Not just a friend," she replied, "a new beginning." It was a sentiment that felt heavier than the words alone, a turning point forged from sacrifice, pain, and an unyielding hope. The curse that had once bound the garden in darkness was no longer a looming threat, but a memory etched into the soil, a scar healing beneath the sun's gentle warmth. Together, they walked the familiar paths lined with roses now blooming in softer hues, their colors less fierce but no less beautiful. The flowers seemed to respond to their presence, petals unfurling as if reaching toward the future they dared to imagine. Elara's footsteps were steady, grounded by a newfound acceptance of the garden's magic alongside her scientific mind. She had spent years questioning, probing, doubting, but now she understood that the garden's enchantment was not a contradiction to reason but a complement. UV changed, Rowan observed, breaking the comfortable silence as they paused near the ancient stone fountain, its waters clear and singing with life. Elara nodded, her gaze drifting to the sparkling surface. "So have you?" He took her hand, their fingers intertwining with a familiarity born of shared trials. "I used to think I had to protect the garden alone, that opening up was weakness. But with you, I see strength in trust." Her heart swelled at his words, the walls she had built around him crumbling under the weight of genuine connection. "We re stronger together," she whispered. Their moment was interrupted by the soft rustle of footsteps. Mara approached, her silver hair catching the light like a halo. In her hands, she carried a woven basket filled with herbs and a collection of ancient scrolls, relics of the garden's deeper history. "The roses are responding," Mara said, her voice steady and warm. "The balance is shifting." Elara accepted the basket gratefully, feeling the pulse of old magic in Mara's touch. "What must we do now?" Mara smiled, a glimmer of pride and relief in her eyes. "Protect the harmony you've helped create. Nurture the garden as you nurture each other. Science and magic, intertwined like the roots beneath your feet." Later, beneath the canopy of blossoming branches, Mara guided Elara through a ritual of blessing. The air was thick with the scent of lavender and rosemary, the soft chant of ancient words weaving a protective spell around the garden's heart. Elara's hands trembled as she traced symbols on the earth, feeling the warmth of the magic seep into her skin, a tangible connection to the legacy she had once feared. Meanwhile, Rowan tended to the roses with reverence, his every movement a silent prayer. His past burdens, once a heavy cloak, now felt lighter, shared and understood. Beside him, Lila darted through the garden paths, her laughter ringing like bells, a bright spark of life and innocence. She stopped to pluck a wildflower, her eyes shining with dreams untainted by the curse's shadow. Elara watched them both, a fierce, protective love swelling within her. "This is what we fight for," she said softly to Rowan. "Not just survival, but a future where love isn't chained by fear." Rowan nodded, his gaze steady and full of promise. "We'll grow new roots here together." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of rose and amber, Elara and Rowan stood hand in hand amid the gentle sway of petals. The garden was no longer a place of despair but a sanctuary of hope, where science and magic danced in harmony, and love blossomed anew fierce, fragile and free. But even as night settled, a whisper lingered on the breeze, a reminder that the past's shadows were never far. Yet they faced it unafraid, bound by a love that had weathered storms and emerged stronger. "Whatever comes," Elara murmured, "we face it as one." Rowan squeezed her hand, their hearts beating in unison beneath the vast, starlit sky. Together. And so, with the garden's legacy rewritten, their story continued, a testament to endurance, to sacrifice, and to the unbreakable power of new roots taking hold in the fertile soil of hope. The firelight danced across the walls of Mara's small cottage, casting flickering shadows that seemed to breathe with the ancient magic enfolding the room. Elara sat across from Mara, the scent of dried herbs and earth mingling in the air, filling the space with a profound sense of life and history. Between them lay a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with time, inscribed with flowing script that hinted at secrets long kept from the world outside Ravenwood. Mara's silver hair caught the glow of the fire as she spoke, her voice steady but carrying the weight of generations. My family has been the garden's guardians for centuries, she began, her eyes reflecting both pride and sorrow. We made a pact long ago, binding ourselves to the land and its magic to protect it, and those who love within it from destruction. But it has come at a cost. Elara leaned forward, the lines of curiosity and empathy etched deep into her face. She had come seeking answers, and Mara was offering more than she had dared hope. The curse, Mara continued, is not merely a punishment, but a protection. It guards the garden from forces that would see it destroyed or exploited. But it demands sacrifice. The price of love here has always been high. Rowan entered quietly, his presence grounding the room like the roots of the ancient roses outside. His piercing blue eyes met Elara's, a silent conversation passing between them, a mix of understanding, fear, and resolve. Mara glanced at him, a hint of a smile softening her features. You both carry this legacy now, she said gently. Not as victims, but as stewards. It is your choice how to honor those who came before. The next evening, under a sky bruised by the fading light of dusk, Elara and Rowan wandered the garden. The roses, once vibrant and intoxicating, now drooped, their petals curling into ash like husks. They moved slowly, hands intertwined, as if drawing strength from one another amidst the quiet morning. Elara's voice broke the silence. So many lost here. Lovers who vanished like whispers carried off by the wind. Rowan squeezed her hand gently, but their memories linger in the soil, the thorns, the blooms. We owe them more than silence. Together they knelt by a patch of stubborn buds, pushing through the cracked earth, tiny proofs of life, refusing to be extinguished. Elara's fingers brushed the green shoots, her heart swelling with a cautious hope. This is our beginning, she whispered. Rowan smiled softly, the first genuine smile Elara had seen from him in weeks, a future unbound by the past. Days later, beneath a blanket of stars, the three gathered by the garden's ancient stone wall. The air hummed with quiet magic, the night alive with possibility. Mara's voice was low but firm as she spoke of balance, stewardship, and hope. We cannot undo what has been done, she said, but we can choose how to move forward. The garden needs guardians, not prisoners of fear or sorrow, but protectors of life and love. Elara and Rowan nodded in solemn agreement, their intertwined hands a symbol of unity and strength. The garden, though scarred, was breathing anew around them. The roses might be fading, but beneath the ash lay seeds waiting to bloom. Together, they vowed to honor the past by nurturing the future, to protect the fragile magic that had bound so many, yet to break the cycle of loss and fear, to let hope blossom where shadows once ruled. As the first light of dawn crept over Ravenwood, the garden whispered promises of renewal. And Elara, Rowan, and Mara stepped forward, bound not by curse or sacrifice, but by love, courage, and an unyielding belief in what could be. But even as the garden stirred with new life, a lingering question remained. Could they truly break free from the legacy that had shaped them? Or would the shadows of the past forever entwine their fate? The answer would come in time, as the roses slowly began to bloom once more. The late afternoon sun filtered softly through the dense canopy of the ancient rose arbor, dappling the ground with warm pools of light and shadow. Elara sat cross-legged beneath the intertwined branches, her journal open on her lap, pen poised thoughtfully above the yellowed pages. The faint scent of fading roses hung in the air, a bittersweet reminder of both beauty and loss. Her sharp green eyes traced the words she had written, then looked up to the garden around her. The petals, once vibrant and intoxicating, now fluttered gently to the earth, their colors dimming but still holding a quiet grace. This garden had been a crucible of pain and mystery, a place where love had both blossomed and withered under the weight of a curse centuries old. Elara's journey here had begun with skepticism and cold scientific inquiry, a determination to unravel the secrets buried beneath the soil and thorns. Yet now, as the sun fell lower, she felt the fragile threads of hope weaving through her heart. It was not just about evidence or explanation anymore, it was about understanding, acceptance, and the weight of sacrifice. She skimmed her notes, recalling the moments that had shaped her transformation. The whispered warnings of Mara, the herbalist whose knowledge of ancient magic had opened doors Elara never thought to knock on. The steady presence of Rowan, the gardener's descendant, whose quiet strength had grounded her through every storm of doubt and fear. His piercing blue eyes, once clouded with guilt and burden, now held a glimmer of peace that mirrored her own burgeoning resolve. Elara closed her journal and rose, the soft rustle of her skirt mingling with the gentle sigh of the evening breeze. She wandered deeper into the garden, the earth beneath her feet cool and comforting. Ahead the stone memorial stood, worn smooth by time and weather, a testament to the generations bound to this land by love, loss, and the curse that had haunted them all. Rowan was already there, his figure silhouetted against the fading light as he traced his fingers over the carved names. The weight of his family's history had once been a shackle, but now it seemed to ground him. He turned as Elara approached, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "It's harder to feel burdened when you understand the roots," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of countless unspoken emotions. Elara reached out, her hand finding his, and easier to nurture new growth when you accept the past. They stood side by side in silence, the garden around them alive with the soft chorus of evening. Somewhere nearby, the last roses of the season bloomed weakly but defiantly, their petals a delicate promise of renewal. Later, in the cozy warmth of Mara's cottage, the three gathered around a low wooden table strewn with dried herbs and flickering candles. The air was thick with the earthy aroma of chamomile and lavender, calming and grounding. Mara's silver hair caught the candlelight as she smiled gently at them. "The garden will heal, as will those who care for it," she said. "But it will take tending, patience, and the courage to embrace both light and shadow." Elara nodded, feeling the truth of those words settle deep within her. "I'm ready to help," she said firmly. "Not just as a botanist, but as part of this story." Rowan reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Together," he promised. As twilight deepened, Elara and Rowan returned once more to the garden. The night air was cool, their breaths visible as they stood amidst the softened glow of the lingering roses. The curse had been broken, but its echoes lingered, a reminder of what had been lost and what could still be nurtured. "This place will never be the same," Elara whispered. "Nor will we," Rowan replied, his gaze steady and unwavering. "But that's not a bad thing." Their fingers intertwined, a silent vow passing between them. In the garden where roses once turned to ash, hope now blossomed anew. And though the path ahead was uncertain, they would walk it together, bound not by curse, but by love, sacrifice, and the promise of new beginnings. Yet, as the night deepened and shadows lengthened, a faint rustling stirred among the thorns, a whisper of the past, a question of the future. The pale light of dawn filtered softly through the heavy branches of the ancient oaks surrounding Ravenwood's rose garden. The air was cool, still carrying the faint scent of night's lingering dew. But as Elara stepped carefully along the wending path, a subtle warmth bloomed in her chest. Before her stretched rows of roses, their petals no longer the fierce crimson or ominous black that had once marked the curse's terrible grip. Instead, they were fragile muted pinks, gentle ivory, and the softest blushes of peach, each bloom trembling with tentative life, as if the garden itself was breathing a quiet sigh of relief. Elara knelt beside a cluster of these pale roses, her fingers brushing lightly over the delicate petals. A faint glow seemed to pulse from within them, a gentle light that had not been there before. The air was thick with the sweet scent of earth and new growth, mingling with the distant song of birds whose melodies celebrated the fragile renewal. Her heart swelled with cautious hope, the years of fear and shadows slowly giving way to something new, something beautiful. Behind her, the soft crunch of footsteps stirred the silence. Rowan's voice, low and steady, broke through the morning stillness. "They're different now," he said, his piercing blue eyes reflecting the pale light. "Not like before. The curse's hold is weakening, Elara glanced up, meeting his gaze. There was a softness there she hadn't seen in months, no longer the guarded, burdened man who carried the weight of centuries on his shoulders, but someone reborn alongside the garden's fragile blooms. She reached out, intertwining her fingers with his, the warmth of his hand grounding her. "It's because we fought for this," she whispered. "Because we refused to let the darkness win." Together they walked hand in hand along the garden's winding paths, their footsteps muffled by the soft grass. Around them, the roses bloomed in muted shades, no longer fierce or menacing, but tender and vulnerable, like their love forged through pain and sacrifice. The sun climbed higher, bathing the garden in golden light that danced upon the petals, illuminating the delicate veins that traced each flower's heart. It was a testament to endurance, to resilience, and to the quiet strength found in hope. As they strolled, the sound of laughter drifted through the air, light and carefree. Turning a corner, Elara found Lila darting through the bushes, her sun-kissed hair catching the light like strands of gold. The young girl's eyes sparkled with delight as she chased a butterfly, her laughter ringing clear and pure amidst the lingering shadows of the garden's past. Watching her, Elara felt the heavy weight of loss ease a momentary balm that reminded her why they had fought so hard. "She's a reminder," Rowan said quietly, his gaze following his sister's joyful dance, "of everything worth protecting." Elara nodded, her breath catching with a mixture of sadness and hope. "And a promise," she added, "that even after ashes, blossoms can grow." As twilight approached, the garden's colors deepened, folding into rich hues of purple and amber. Mara sat by a small fire at the garden's edge, her silver hair catching the flickering flames. Her weathered hands moved with practiced grace, brewing a calming herbal tea that filled the air with soothing scents of chamomile and lavender. Elara and Rowan joined her, settling close to the warmth as the night crept in. Mara's voice was soft but steady. "Patience," she said, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "Healing is never swift, but it is certain when nurtured with love and care. This garden, like your hearts, will mend slowly, but surely." Elara reached out, squeezing Rowan's hand as the three of them sat in companionable silence. The flickering flames cast warm shadows on their faces, illuminating the lines of worry and hope intertwined. Outside the circle of firelight, stars began to prickle the darkening sky, silent witnesses to the promise of renewal. The garden's fragile new bloom paralleled their own journey, scarred but alive, tentative but full of possibility. Each petal that unfurled was a symbol of endurance, a quiet rebellion against the darkness that had once threatened to consume everything they loved. Elara and Rowan's love, tempered by loss and sacrifice, was the living proof that even in the ashes of pain, life could blossom anew. But as the night deepened, a lingering question hovered at the edges of their thoughts. Could this fragile new life truly signal the end of the curse? Or was the garden merely gathering strength in silence, waiting for the moment to reclaim its claim? Elara gazed upward, the cool night air brushing her face, as she whispered into the darkness, "Whatever comes, we face it together." Rowan nodded, his voice a vow carried on the breeze, "Together always." And beneath the gentle watch of the stars, the roses bloomed on blossoms in ashes, fragile yet unyielding, echoing the enduring heartbeat of love itself. The garden's transformation was not without its challenges. As days passed, Elara meticulously tended to the roses, her hands steady but her mind alert to every subtle shift. The blooms, though delicate, demanded care and patience. The curse's remnants lingered in the shadows, whispering warnings on the wind. Yet with each new petal that opened, the promise of a future unchained grew stronger. One afternoon, as sunlight dappled through the leaves, Rowan found Elara sitting beneath the largest rose bush, her eyes closed, fingers tracing the veins of a single bloom. "You were becoming one with the garden," he teased softly. She smiled, eyes still closed. "Maybe I already am." He sat beside her, the warmth of his presence a balm against the cool air. "It suits you," he said. UV brought life back here, not just to the roses, but to me. Elara opened her eyes, meeting his gaze with a quiet intensity. And UV taught me what it means to believe in magic, in love, and in hope. Their hands found each other again, fingers entwining with a certainty born from trials shared and battles won. The garden around them seemed to lean in closer, the soft rustle of leaves a gentle applause for their resilience. Even Leela, once unaware of the curse's full shadow, now helped with small tasks, her youthful energy a bright spark among the muted colors. She picked wildflowers to scatter among the roses, laughter erupting like music that wove through the air and lifted the spirits of all who heard. Mara's presence remained a constant source of wisdom and comfort. Her stories of ancient magic and healing rituals became threads that stitched together the fabric of the garden's renewal, binding past and present in a tapestry of hope. Yet beneath the surface of this fragile piece, Elara and Rowan knew the journey was not over. The scars of the curse had not vanished, they were etched into the very soil, into the petals of every rose. But now, they were no longer shackles. They were reminders of the strength it took to break free. As summer's warmth faded into the cool embrace of autumn, the garden stood as a testament to endurance, a place where love could grow anew, even in the ashes of despair. And for Elara and Rowan, that truth was the most precious bloom of all. Dawn spilled over the horizon in soft hues of peach and gold, casting a gentle light across Ravenwood's once haunted rose garden. The air, still fragrant with the lingering scent of damp earth and fading petals, held the promise of new beginnings. Elara stood near the garden's edge, her gaze sweeping over the delicate blooms, some still holding on to their fragile beauty. Others bowed under the weight of the season's end. Beside her, Rowan moved with quiet purpose, gathering the last of their belongings with a practiced calm that belied the storm of emotions beneath his steady exterior. The house behind them was alive with a gentle bustle as Mara prepared the final meals for their departure. Her silver hair caught the early sunlight, and her eyes shone with the wisdom of one who had long borne witness to the garden's dark legacy and its fragile hope. Lila's laughter echoed through the garden paths, a bright and youthful melody that seemed to breathe life back into the once somber estate. Elara felt the weight of the past months settle within her chest, a mixture of loss, love, and the fierce determination that had driven her into this cursed place. The memories of vanished lovers, whispered warnings, and the harrowing rituals that had tested their very souls lingered, but so did the undeniable bond she shared with Rowan. Together, they had faced shadows that had haunted generations, and now, standing on the cusp of freedom, the future stretched out before them, uncharted and unbound. As she adjusted the strap of her weathered satchel, Rowan's hand brushed against hers. The contact was brief but electric, a silent vow that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low, threaded with both hope and the faintest tremor of uncertainty. Elara nodded, her green eyes reflecting the dawn's light. "As ready as I'll ever be." Their steps carried them away from the garden's heart, past the wending paths lined with roses that no longer held the menace of the curse, but instead whispered of renewal. The village beyond stirred, its inhabitants emerging from long-held fears towards something brighter. Nathan awaited them by the old stone well, his usual skepticism softened by the trials they had endured together. "Elara," he began, his voice steady but warm, "I was wrong to doubt you, to doubt all of this. I can't say I understand everything, but I believe in you and in what you and Rowan have done here." Relief and gratitude washed over Elara as she met his gaze. "Thank you, Nathan. That means more than you know." He smiled, the first genuine one in many months, and extended his hand. "Take care of each other." With a nod, Elara clasped his hand firmly, a bridge mending between past doubts and future possibilities. Mara approached then, her presence serene and grounding. "The garden will remember you both," she said softly, "not as victims of a curse, but as the ones who broke its hold. There is healing to be done, but the first step is always the hardest. Elara and Rowan exchanged a glance, a shared recognition of the journey they had undertaken and the one still ahead. "We'll carry this with us," Rowan replied, "and protect it in new ways." Lila bounded over, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Will you come back?" she asked, eyes wide with hope. Rowan knelt to meet her gaze, a rare softness breaking through. "One day, little one. For now, we have to find our own way." The garden seemed to breathe around them, the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant call of birds weaving a tapestry of life and renewal. As Elara and Rowan stepped onto the path leading away from Ravenwood, the last petals of the roses drifted down like fragile promises. Their future was unwritten, but no longer shadowed by fear or bound by ancient curses. Together, they faced a world where love could bloom freely, where sacrifice had forged a new beginning, and where hope, like the garden itself, could grow anew. And as the sun rose higher, warming their backs, Elara whispered, "This is just the beginning." Rowan squeezed her hand gently. A future unbound. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it was theirs to walk. The twilight had fallen over Ravenwood, casting a pale lavender glow across the sprawling rose garden, where every petal shimmered like a delicate jewel. Elara stood at the garden's heart, her breath shallow, eyes locked on the single rose that still clung to its thorny stem. The last petal trembled gently, suspended in a fragile balance between bloom and decay. Beside her, Rowan's fingers found hers, their grasp steady and warm against the creeping chill of the evening. The air was thick with a tension that hummed beneath the quiet, a silent challenge whispered by the garden itself. The shadows cast by the towering rose bushes flickered and twisted as a sudden breeze swept through the garden, carrying with it a faint scent of earth and something darker, something ancient. Elara's pulse quickened as the wind seemed to breathe life into the darkness, swirling tendrils of shadow that danced like specters around their feet. The garden was testing them one final time. "Hold on," Rowan murmured, his voice low and steady as he tightened his grip. "Whatever comes, we face it together." His piercing blue eyes searched hers, filled with a fierce determination that mirrored her own. Despite the fear that prickled her skin, Elara felt a swell of courage rise within her. This was the moment they had been preparing for, the moment to break the final chains of the curse. From the edge of the garden, a small figure watched silently. Lila, Rowan's younger sister, stood cloaked in the fading light, her wide eyes shimmering with hope and a quiet bravery that belied her youth. She did not fully understand the darkness that had haunted her family for generations, but she knew this night was important. Her presence was a reminder of the future that awaited beyond the curse's shadow, a future Elara and Rowan were fighting to secure. The shadows thickened, coiling around their ankles like smoke, whispering promises of despair and loss. Elara's heart ached with the memory of all those who had vanished before her, lovers lost to the garden's cruel magic. But now, armed with love and sacrifice, she refused to let history repeat itself. She closed her eyes briefly, centering herself in the warmth of Rowan's hand and the steady beat of his heart. "We end this," she said softly, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "No more disappearances, no more fear." Together, they stepped forward, moving into the swirling darkness with unwavering resolve. Elara's fingers brushed the trembling petal, and as she did, a sudden surge of light burst forth from the roses. The shadows recoiled, hissing like a cornered beast before dissolving into the night air. The garden was alight with golden luminescence, each rose glowing with renewed vitality as the curse unraveled before their eyes. The last petal slipped free, drifting down like a feather to land softly on the earth. With its fall, a profound silence enveloped the garden, broken only by the distant call of night birds and the steady rustle of leaves. Elara and Rowan remained locked in a quiet embrace, their breaths mingling as the weight of the curse lifted from their shoulders. Lila stepped forward, her face alight with wonder as she reached out to touch a glowing bloom. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice trembling with awe. Elara smiled, feeling the warmth of hope blossom within her chest. The garden had been their battleground, their prison, and now their sanctuary. Bound by love and sacrifice, they had rewritten the destiny that had haunted Ravenwood for centuries. As stars emerged overhead, the garden seemed to breathe anew, its beauty tinged with the bittersweet knowledge of all that had been lost and all that could now be saved. Elara and Rowan stood united, ready to face whatever dawn would bring together, unshackled and unafraid. Yet even as peace settled over the roses, a single question lingered between them, fragile as the petals that had just fallen. Could love truly conquer all the shadows of the past, or were some ghosts destined to linger in the corners of the heart? Their journey was far from over, but for tonight, among the last whispers of the garden's magic and the gentle fall of its final petal, hope bloomed eternal. The first light of dawn crept gently over the horizon, spilling a warm, golden hue across the once cursed grounds of Ravenwood. Elara stood beside Rowan on the garden's highest hill, their fingers intertwined, the silence between them thick with unspoken words and the weight of what had passed. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of earth and dew, while the withered roses below looked almost fragile in the soft morning light, their petals dull but touched with a lingering beauty that spoke of endurance. For the first time in decades, the garden felt free-breathing, alive yet marked indelibly by its dark legacy. Elara's sharp green eyes scanned the landscape, the memories of the curse's grip flashing like shadows behind her gaze. The sacrifice, the fear, the love that had blossomed amid thorns, all woven into the very soil beneath their feet. Rowan's presence beside her was a steadying force, his strong hand squeezing hers reassuringly. His piercing blue eyes reflected the dawn, glimmering with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "We made it," he whispered, voice rough with emotion, as if saying the words aloud might somehow drive away the fragile promise of peace. Mara approached quietly, her silver hair catching the sun's first rays as she knelt beside a cluster of small blooms that had survived the night. Her gentle eyes met Elara's, a knowing softness there that spoke of healing and ancient wisdom. "The garden will heal," Mara said softly, her voice like a balm. "And so will we. The past will always be a part of us, but it doesn't have to define what comes next." Nathan appeared from the path below, his footsteps light but deliberate. He wore a tentative smile, the skepticism that had often shadowed his concern for Elara now tempered by understanding. He stopped beside her, the morning breeze ruffling his short brown hair. "You were right," he admitted quietly. "There's more to this place than science alone can explain. And maybe that's okay." His eyes held a hopeful gleam, an olive branch extended without words. Elara's heart softened at the gesture, the bridge between her world and his finally spanning the divide. Together, they watched as the garden shadows shrank beneath the growing light. New green shoots pushed through the soil, tender yet determined, breaking through the ashes of what had been. The roses, though no longer vibrant, held a quiet dignity, a testament to survival and the cycles of life and death that had shaped this place. Elara felt a surge of something she had long struggled to embrace, hope. What now? Rowan's voice broke the silence, a question that hung between them like a fragile thread. Elara turned toward him, her gaze steady and clear. "Now we rebuild not just the garden but ourselves. We carry the lessons with us, the sacrifices, the love. We make sure this history never repeats itself." Rowan nodded, his expression softening. Together, the sun ascended, bathing Ravenwood in light and warmth. The curse was broken, but the story of the garden, its lovers, and their sacrifices would live on, etched in the hearts of those who dared to love despite the thorns. As Elara and Rowan stood united, the future stretched before them, uncertain yet brimming with possibility. The roses might have turned to ash, but from those ashes, they would bloom anew. The dawn broke over Ravenwood like a soft breath, casting pale light across the garden, where the roses once bloomed with a fierce and haunting beauty. Now those same petals drifted silently to the earth like ash, curling at the edges and fading to dull hues of grey and brown. Elara stood beside Rowan in the heart of the withering garden. Their hands intertwined, a fragile anchor against the lingering shadows that still whispered faintly in the morning air. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was thick, filled with the weight of sacrifices made and losses endured. Around them, the once vibrant blooms that held the curse's terrible power now lay broken and lifeless, marking the end of an era defined by pain and fear. The air smelled of damp earth and dry petals, a scent both mournful and cleansing. Rowan squeezed Elara's hand gently, his piercing blue eyes searching hers. "It's over," he said quietly, voice rough with emotion. "The curse is broken." Elara nodded, her sharp green eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "We did it," she whispered, the words still feeling surreal after everything they had faced. Together, around them, the garden seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The oppressive weight that had hung over Ravenwood for centuries lifted, replaced by a fragile sense of peace. But peace came with a price, one they both knew too well. Mara appeared at the edge of the clearing, her silver hair catching the soft light, as she moved with a grace that belied her years. She carried a small bundle of wildflower seeds, symbols of renewal and hope. "The garden will heal," she said, her voice warm and steady. "But it will never forget." Elara stepped forward, accepting the seeds. "We'll make sure it remembers only what it must," she replied, a fierce determination igniting within her. Nathan arrived shortly after, his usual skepticism softened by the recent events. He offered Elara a tentative smile, a quiet acknowledgement of her courage and the path she had chosen. "You've changed everything," he said, his voice tinged with respect. "For all of us." Lila darted through the fading rose bushes, her laughter light and free. She paused to look back at Elara and Rowan, eyes bright with innocent hope. "The garden's not scary anymore," she said simply. Rowan crouched beside her, ruffling her hair. "No, it's not," he agreed, his heart swelling with a protective pride. As the sun climbed higher, the trio Elara, Rowan, and Mara began planting the wildflower seeds in the barren patches where the cursed roses once thrived. It was an act of defiance against the darkness that had plagued the garden for so long, a promise that life and love could endure beyond sacrifice and sorrow. Elara paused, her gaze drifting over the landscape that had held so much tragedy and beauty. "What comes next?" she asked softly. Rowan smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached his eyes for the first time in years. "We build," he said simply, "a future unbound by the past." Together, they faced the horizon, the ashes of the roses at their feet, and the promise of new beginnings ahead. The garden, once a prison for lost lovers, was reborn, a testament to love's enduring power and the sacrifices that had paved the way for hope. But as the last petal fell, carried away on a gentle breeze, Elara's heart tightened with a mixture of grief and gratitude. The curse was gone, but its lessons, its scars, would remain forever etched in their souls. And in that bittersweet moment, beneath a sky brushed with the soft colors of dawn, they understood that sometimes love must burn to ashes to bloom anew. The future awaited, fragile and bright, as Ravenwood began to heal. Elara lingered in the garden as the village slowly awoke around her. The once hostile whispers of fear had softened to cautious curiosity, and the locals began to step closer, drawn by the absence of the curse's dark shadow. Mara's presence was a steady comfort, her knowledge a bridge between the ancient magic and the new reality taking root. "You did well, child," Mara said one afternoon, placing a gentle hand on Elara's shoulder. "Not many would have the strength to face what you have." Elara smiled faintly, the weight of exhaustion pressing down, but her spirit unbroken. "I couldn't have done it without Rowan and without believing in something beyond what I could see." Her journey from skeptic to believer had been a tumultuous one, filled with moments of doubt and fear. Yet standing here now, surrounded by the remnants of a curse broken and the fragile first blooms of hope, she felt a profound transformation within herself. Rowan joined them, his gaze sweeping over the garden with a protective tenderness. "There's still work to do," he said. "The garden needs care, and so do we." Elara nodded, her heart swelling with a love tempered by loss but brightened by possibility. "Then we'll start fresh together." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the garden's new growth, Elara and Rowan stood side by side. Their hands found each other's once more, fingers intertwining in a silent vow. The garden's roses had turned to ash, but from that ash rose a love strong enough to defy fate itself. And as night fell softly over Ravenwood, the stars above whispered promises of new beginnings and endless tomorrows.